Hear anything?
Mm-mm. I'm seeing.
Now, testing. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. So I was trying to introduce you guys to our wonderful host here at Market Connect Realty. So tomorrow I'm going to have him speak to you guys and just give you some industry insight, just kind of find out what to expect. So have a question ready that you can ask him. Any random question you have about the business, just so you can have baseline and before you start your journey. So it's important. So try to see if we can get some guest speakers for you guys. All right, let's jump into our session. The review questions for units 3 and 4. If you can open up your textbook to unit 3 specifically. Here we go. So unit 3 was all about license statuses. We even talked about license renewal. We learned a little bit more about the beeper and FREC within this unit. Let's start with question number 1. The following statements are true with respect to the members of FREC, except that they? Oh yeah, correct answer is C as in Charlie. Because we know members of FREC are chosen by who? The governor. Confirmed by the state senate, of course. We'll have a question about that in just a moment. Thanks, Ryan. But they're not employees of the governor or the government. We know how they're compensated. We know how they're chosen, of course. We just reviewed that. Number 2, members of FREC are appointed by, we answer that. It's D as in Delta, governor confirmed by the state senate. Number 3, which duty is an exercise of FREC's quasi-legislative power? They can kind of make laws. It's C, to promulgate, to adopt the laws. Yep. 4, real estate licensees on active duty with the U.S. Army are required to renew their licenses when? D, within 2 years of discharge. Good job. Number 5, the term of office for each commission member is? Yes, 4-year staggered terms, right? Or 2 4-year terms back to back. Number 6, members of the commission receive? Yes, $50 per day plus reimbursement for out-of-pocket expenses when on official business. How often do they meet? Once a month. Where do they meet? Downtown Orlando, you got it, in the headquarters for the Division of Real Estate. Number 7, which commission responsibility is an exercise of its quasi-judicial power? Yes, it's D, grant or deny license applications. They can kind of judge you. Right? And this all falls under executive authority, executive power, which means they have control over your what? License. So can FREC award you a license? Yeah. Can they deny you from getting a license? Of course. Can they take away your license? Yes. And we refer to that as revocation of your real estate license. The commission is not empowered to correct answer is C as in Charlie. Can they put you in jail? FREC, no. Can FREC force you to pay somebody in a lawsuit? No. Can they recommend you serve a jail sentence, recommend you pay somebody in a lawsuit? Yes, they can make that recommendation in a criminal case, but they can't enforce themselves. Remember, they only have control over your what? Your license. So once again, the most severe penalty FREC can impose against a licensee is to do what with their license? Revocation. And we know revocation is permanent. 9, specific responsibilities of FREC do not include? It's D. Because who prepares and submits the state licensing examination? It's the beeper's responsibility under the Division of Professions, but they contract with Pearson VUE, the software company, to administer the state exam. 10, which power is not granted to the beeper under Florida Statute 455? C, appoint FREC members. That's easy one. Number 11, which statement regarding the beeper is true? It is B. They operate under the executive branch of the Florida government. 12. FREC may reinstate a null and void license when? Yes, if you can prove physical or economic hardship. Yep. 13. How many members of FREC may hold a current active sales associate license? It's 1. A is in alpha. For at least 2 years, right? If an active licensee fails to renew their third 2-year license before the expiration date on the license what? A, reverts automatically to involuntary inactive status at the end of the license period. It says their third 2-year license, so that means they've already completed their first renewal, which we know is the most important renewal. And we know if you're late by 1 day for your first renewal, what happens to your license? Becomes null and void. Different from what we see here. If you only had to complete your CE, they do cut you some slack. They allow you to be late and still renew and get back on track, but it could cost you more time and money. And we'll see number 15 to piggyback off of that. If you are already involuntary inactive, that means you're already late to complete your CE. Remember, this status is a result of failing to renew on time. How long could you be past the expiration date involuntary inactive before your license is null and void? It's A, 2 years. Yep. 16, who may not reactivate a license to active status? Yes, if you did not complete your post-licensing requirement prior to license renewal, the expiration date. 17, an owner-developer owns several properties with different names, but all of the business entities are closely connected and controlled by that owner-developer. An associate working for that owner-developer may legally obtain a group license, yes, under the authority of that owner-developer, registered with the beeper. 18, a broker moves his real estate office to a new location. He's so busy with the move, he forgets to notify the beeper. What status results when you fail to notify on time? Correct answer is cease to be in force. A common mistake is selecting involuntary inactive. I know that's not an option for us here, but they'll throw that in there to confuse you. Remember, cease to be in force is when you fail to renew on time. 19, which statement is true regarding multiple licenses? It is B as in Bravo. A broker who qualifies as a broker for more than one brokerage entity may hold multiple licenses. And 20, a broker decides to relocate her real estate brokerage office. She notifies the beeper of change in address. She also informs the beeper of the names of the associates who are no longer associated with her brokerage. The associates' licenses will be, it's D as in Delta, place on inactive status. Voluntary, right? Until they can find new employment. Let's move on. Unit 4 questions, which was all about those 3 relationships. Can you recall those 3? Let's review those 3, if I can, with you guys real quick. The first relationship that we described was a no brokerage relationship. And we know it sounds odd, but the word broker means to facilitate. So if you're hired as a no broker, you're hired not to what? Facilitate, not to negotiate. You're not representing them. You're simply limited to taking care of the what? The paperwork, the contracts used to solidify the deal. When most likely would you be hired to just take care of the paperwork? When you're dealing with a FSBO, we'll have a question about that in just a moment. The name itself, for sale by owner, means the owner wants to sell it. They don't need you to sell it. They don't need you to represent them. But once a buyer is found that's willing to pay the price they agreed to, what to do next, right? So that's why it might be useful. There's one other circumstance, but I'll wait to present that to you. The transaction broker relationship. Transaction broker. You're brokering in the transaction. Make sense? So you're facilitating. You can represent, but you're not limited to one side. You can represent what? Both sides. And make a what off of both sides? A commish off of both sides. But when it comes to negotiation, you must remain what? How do you do so when the buyer and the seller are dealing at what with one another? Arm's length. You present what to each side? Offers and information until they can reach a what? An agreement, mutual assent, meeting of the minds. Does that make sense? Okay. And we know that a feature of the transaction broker relationship is that limited representation, limited confidentiality. That's that neutrality that we're talking about. I just described it in different words. And then the single agent relationship, you're going to choose your side. Whatever side you select, buyer or seller, not both. You have loyalty, obedience with them. It's the only relationship out of the three, which also includes what type of relationship starts with the F? Fiduciary, which means alliance. You have alliance with that party. You can only have alliance with one, not with both sides, obviously. So single agent relationship, even because this is the only one where a fiduciary exists, what is that buyer or seller, whatever side you selected, referred to as? Starts with a P. Principal. Your brokerage is going, and you are going to act as agent, looking out for their best interests on their behalf. The other two relationships, transaction broker and the no brokerage relationship, because fiduciary does not exist in those other two, what is the buyer and or seller referred to as? Can you remember? Customer, yes, called the customer. So remembering that terminology will help you identify right versus wrong answers and eliminate the incorrect ones. Because once again, if they use the term principal, you know they're only talking about the single agent relationship. If you already have a single agent relationship with one side, what's the only other acceptable relationship that can be combined with that? The no brokerage. So if you have alliance with one side, the only other way that you can help the other side is to take care of the what? The no brokerage relationship. Does that make sense? Okay. And even though there's three relationships, which one is automatically assumed in the state of Florida? Yes, perfect. That's it. If you understand what we just reviewed, if it's making sense, if it's clicking for you guys, you're good for Unit 4. Okay, I can almost guarantee. Let's go through these questions though. Question 1. Real estate brokerage company has entered into a single agent buyer brokerage relationship with the buyer. That's redundant. In order to show buyer property is listed with the same brokerage company for which it also has a single agent relationship with, how can you accomplish that? Well, you have to switch the relationship. And there's only one document that you have to get signed by both parties to accomplish that. Yes, it's D as in Delta. Yeah. It doesn't have the full name here, but let me share it with you. It's called the Consent to Transition to Transaction Broker form. Once again, if you try to say it without a rhythm, you can't do it. Good luck. I'm serious. It's called the Consent to Transition to Transaction Broker. Do you feel that rhythm?
Yeah.
So let's use that to help us remember. Consent to Transition to Transaction Broker form. Yeah, man. Okay. You get that one document signed, that's enough for you to switch. You're getting permission to switch to the transaction broker relationship. Then you can represent both sides, make a commission off of both sides within the same brokerage company. Number 2, the brokerage relationship disclosure requirements in Chapter 475 of the Florida statutes apply to. We're looking for the sale of residential property, and yes, that's B as in Bravo. Why is it not C? Because a common mistake is selecting C. You might see residential, but then it says lease. And those three relationships that we know about, that we just got done reviewing, don't exist in a residential lease for the sale of residential property. And yes, one condo unit is at 4 units or less. Yeah. Number 3, which statement best describes the duty of loyalty in a single agent relationship? Easy enough, it's A. Yes. A is an alpha. Must act in the best interest of the keyword principal. Number 4, a real estate broker who works in a keyword limited capacity for both sides is a B as in Bravo, transaction broker. Dual agency is a little bit different. This is where you have alliance with both sides, and this can only be accomplished in a non-residential transaction. Let's continue to number 5. A licensee of ABC Realty must give the no brokerage relationship notice to? B. Yeah, as we reviewed, right? FSBO. When would you enter? When would you be hired not to negotiate, not to represent? Well, most likely when you're dealing with the FSBO, for sale by owner. Number 6, a broker has listed a seller's property. The seller has disclosed to a broker that the ceramic tile is loose and it's covered by a rug. What's your duty if you have knowledge of it? I'll just make it simple if I can paraphrase. Yeah, correct answer is B as in Bravo. Disclose, hey, ceramic tile is loose because the buyer can't see it for themselves and you have knowledge. And your job is to disclose latent, hidden material, physical defects in the property. Doesn't matter how small, like what we see here. I mean, it's really small. Loose tile, really? Got to disclose that? Yeah. Number 7, a transaction broker has all the duties listed below except, yeah, because that's a duty of the single agent relationship. D is in Delta. Number 8, let me paraphrase number 8. You receive 2 offers on a property. If I can just get your attention, you receive 2 offers. What's your duty? That's the answer, isn't it? D is in Delta. Longest answer, present both offers, explaining the details of each to the seller so they can make an informed decision. So that leads us to have a quick discussion about it. Do you get to decide which offer is most attractive and only present the most attractive offers to your seller? No, you don't have that leisure. You don't have that luxury. Your job is to present all offers, and the seller gets to decide, because you don't know what the motivation of that seller actually is. Hopefully, you know, because you have that relationship, but sometimes it's not all price driven. And obviously from your position, it's price driven, right? The most amount of money I sell this for, the more money I sell it for, the more commission I'm gonna make, right? Because usually it's a percentage based on the sale price. But the seller might be willing to accept an offer for less money because the family, right, that's making the offer. Listen, I use every edge that I can get. This might sound bad and it might sound like a little whatever thing to you, but it does make a difference. It makes a difference for the family that you're working with, and it might make a difference in the hearts of the sellers that want to see their house go to a family that's going to raise their kids there and so forth. I'll have my buyers type up a separate letter. I'll have them attach a family photo to it, and I'll put a paper clip on it, and I'll submit it with the sale contract and say, hey, listen, maybe this is not exactly what you're looking for, but this is the maximum of our budget. They fell in love with it. The kids already chose their rooms. You know what I mean? Like they are going to love this house just as much as you love this house when you raise your, that type of thing. And it really pulls on the heartstrings, and it does make a difference. I've won bids based off of that when there was tons of offers on the property. So just something to consider. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of ammunition. 9, in the common public relationship that exists in a typical real estate transaction, buyers and sellers are said to be dealing at, B as in Bravo, arm's length. What is the Latin phrase used to describe this?
Caveat emptor.
Wow.
Didn't say it right, did I?
You said it exactly right.
Okay.
I'm proud of you. That's awesome. You found a study buddy. Now, here's the thing. Actually, let me piggyback on that. I pay attention. I've been doing this for a long time. The market is very slow right now. I'll share that with you. Usually the class is a little bit more full. It's okay. I'm here no matter what. If I had to do this for free, I do it for free. I love doing this. Bottom line is this. The students that form study groups, they perform higher on their exams. I guess that's the simplest way I can say it. So who's going to be that leader that says, hey, listen, anybody want to join a study group? Yeah, make it on WhatsApp. If you have WhatsApp, if you don't have WhatsApp, download it and then make a study group. And then you guys just motivate each other. And then when you're struggling on a particular question and maybe I'm not available, even though on the exam prep, I didn't tell you probably the most valuable tool I included, which probably should be a separate thing that I charge for, but I included it anyway. I made an AI chat tutor. Okay, I know it sounds a little sci-fi and a little bit hard to believe, but I took AI and I brought it in-house, artificial intelligence, and I said, I'm going to train you on all real estate knowledge. So I fed it a lot of our knowledge and things that we teach here and so forth. I fed it all of this knowledge, all of the rules, the regulations, the circumstances, the questions, everything that you might encounter, not the final exam. And I said, your job, your sole job is to help students answer questions that they might have when they're studying for their class and state exam. So when you get access to the exam prep, I know a couple of you already got it and you're playing around with it. Great. Use it. Click on our icon and it pops up the chat tutor and you can ask it any question under the sun. And most of our students, they hold on to the exam prep for that feature even after they pass the state exam, because now it's your your own assistant, your own AI real estate assistant that you can ask it any question, and not just the obvious questions like exam stuff, questions about marketing yourself as a real estate professional. That's how in-depth it is. Like, man, how do I get more leads? This is what I'm really good at. This is my background. I come from, anybody from medical field or nursing, or like, what's your background? Where do you currently work? Accounting? Financial services? That's why you guys are sitting with each other. Huh? Hospitality? Permit coordinator for accounting?
Yeah.
Which
Well,
county?
I work for a business company.
Yes.
but they-
Okay.
Yeah.
Permanent coordinator for a sign company.
Yeah.
That coordinates with the county. Oh, okay, fair enough. I got it now. So you could say, hey, listen, based on my background in accounting, financial services, permit coordinator, and hospitality, how can I use that background? Give me some use cases to tap into my, I was going to say Rolodex, forgive me, my contacts to use that to get more leads, because this is your sphere of influence. And then it will give you some ideas. And you say, okay, put together a marketing campaign for me. Now give me social media posts that I can share with my friends and family based on the transition I'm making from accounting services, finance, and so forth into real estate. And it will give you all of that. And then if you're ever struggling along the way, you're like, man, I remember in class we talked about this for contracts. This is what was required, and this is a unique circumstance. And maybe your broker is not available to answer the question, and you can't find it online. That's the power that you have in your pocket. I'm serious. I'm going to make it a separate thing, but for now, it's included in the exam prep. All right. So that's how powerful that tool is. Anyhow, yeah. So form a study group. And at the end, I'll remind you again, and then the students online, I'll get you guys, if you're willing to, put your phone number inside of the chat. And then, Nisha, you're going to set it up? Okay. So we have a volunteer. Nisha's going to do it, and she's going to get your contact information. She'll just copy it, take a screenshot or something. Okay. I'll remind you at the end. No question? Okay. 10, if a principal gives a broker instructions that will result in loss or harm to the principal, the broker what? Yeah, the correct answer is D as in Delta. Should inform the principal of the possible harm inherent to the instructions and either do as instructed because you have free will as a human being and suffer the consequences of that, or simply withdraw from the relationship. Number 11, a broker's obligations to consumers with whom the brokerage firm have a no brokerage relationship include the duty of be accounting for all funds. We'll talk more about that today. 12, designated sales associates, which would be an illegal dual agency in residential, is best described as A, single agents for buyers and sellers in a non-residential real estate transaction where the buyer and the seller have certain asset thresholds. What are those asset thresholds? $1 million or more in assets is what they have to prove. 13, which relationship is a general agency relationship? Yes, B as in Bravo, relationship between an employing broker and their associate. They try to trick you with broker associate. They're still an associate. They still operate under the supervision of a broker. 14, which action will terminate a single agent relationship with a principal who has listed a home for sale with a brokerage? Easy enough as D, yeah, destruction by a large sinkhole. And 15, wow, last question here. A real estate broker and their associates are obligated to which duty in all three relationships? It's deal honestly and fairly. Yeah, that's across the board. You remember the no brokerage relationship, the 3 duties that we talked about? Deal honestly and fairly, accounting for all funds, any disclosing all material defects and stuff. That's consistent on all 3 relationships. But anyhow, let's move on. We have some time. We're making good time. Let's get started on our session for today. Is that all right? And then we'll take a break soon after. So units 5 and 6. And I guess I can start off by telling you the most important units in the textbook. There's 19 that you're going to be tested on for your Florida real estate exam. And you can write this down on a separate sheet of paper, wherever you wish. But let me tell you the most important units. What do I want to do? 4, 5, 8, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 16. Those are the most important units in the textbook.
4, 5, 8, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. Yep. Can you see? You can see my screen, right? Everybody see this? Online, I'm assuming. All right. So not all units weigh the same. Some units are heavier in content that you're going to be tested on for your state exam than others. So how many units did I give you? 9? How many total units are there in the textbook? You're welcome. Now, I'm not saying you're not going to study those other units. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the majority of your exam are going to come from these 9. This is a passing grade, the minimum on your state exam. You could be randomly tested on questions from those other units, but if you really understand these 9, you'll be in good shape for your state exam. I'm just trying to save you some time and give you some efficient study efforts. So utilize your time wisely, focus on those more so than the others, and you'll be in good shape. Unit 5 is the most important unit in the textbook. That's why I'm telling you. 12% of your state exam. 12%. It's the highest percentage out of all units. Let's just do the math real quick. Take a look at this. How many questions are there on the state exam? Yeah, there's 100 questions. And then how many units are there in the textbook? There's 19. So you take 100 questions divided by 19 units. That would be 5 questions if they evenly distributed the questions for every single unit. Unit 5 is 12%, more than double. So it's a lot of important content. Highlight as much as possible. No problem with highlighting more than what we discussed in class, but we're going to stick to the most important parts. Sound good? What you need to know for exam purposes to protect your license and others within real estate transactions. So this is all about the procedures that you must follow as an associate working for a real estate what? Yes. So let's jump into it. Look at all the wonderful key terms we're going to discuss and encounter. On page 90, let's start with understanding brokerage offices. We know, because we discussed this, on line 9, all active brokers are required to have a what? Office. And register with who? The beeper. Because the beeper is going to issue a license for that office, that location. We mentioned that, if you can recall. But you might not know the features, the requirements to set up your office that the beeper looks for to determine if it's acceptable or not, to issue a license for it. Let's go through those features. Office must consist of at least one enclosed room in a building of stationary construction that provides privacy to conduct negotiations and closings of real estate transactions. Okay, pretty straightforward, right? An enclosed location where you're performing real estate services is what they're saying. Something interesting here, it says, Florida law does not require that the broker's books, records, real estate transaction files are to be kept within the office because now you can maintain records digitally, right? In the cloud, terabyte hard drive, take it with you on the go. However, that used to be the case. And you have to maintain records for how many years?
5.
5 years. If you remember that. IRS is 3. Real estate is 5. Yep. And it says even here, you can store electronically, but I don't need to bore you with that. Something interesting on line 19. It says, it talks about the acceptable location of your office. As long as local zoning and your HOA, who's HOA? Homeowners Association don't have a problem with you doing it. You can set up your primary brokerage office within your own what? That's awesome for so many new brokers that don't have the capital to open up a brokerage office in an office building somewhere, sign a 5-year lease, pay the money to build out the space and so forth. So what you can do is you can potentially start within your own home if it's acceptable and then branch out. Are associates allowed to open up their own brokerage office? No. But every new office a broker opens would be recognized as a what, or registered as a what type of office? Yep. And pay the appropriate registration fees. You'll see that on line 28. Is there any limit as to how many offices a broker can have? No, they can have thousands if they want. But every office license needs to be maintained. Not only do you have to get a license issued for that unique location, but you have to maintain it. You have to renew it every 2 years. It's very inexpensive, but it's a lot to keep track of if you can imagine. Check this out. I want to read this title out to you because it reveals a lot. Line 36, registrations issued to branch offices are not what? Exactly. So you can't close down an office, use the same license to open up another one. Every location is unique. Must be issued its own unique license. There's only one exception to it, and I feel silly because it's so rare that you'll encounter this. A broker may reopen in the same location that was previously registered without having to get a new license. I mean, when is that going to happen? Maybe if they move back into their house. I don't know. On page 91, I want you to highlight this. Line 1, we see a temporary shelter. And I'd like to give you an example of what a temporary shelter is to better understand. Have you ever seen a trailer sitting on a construction site of a new subdivision? What does that trailer exist for? What is it recognized as? Well, it's a temporary shelter because it's mobile, right? They dumped it on the property, and eventually when they start building the houses and set up their office, they're going to remove that temporary shelter. But it's just a place to meet with people outside of the elements. It's not to conduct real estate business within, because we know the features of a brokerage office, and this doesn't meet those features. It doesn't meet those requirements. If you go back to the previous page, look on line 11. It says in a building of what type of construction, guys? Stationary, not mobile, not temporary. That's why if you ever go to a new subdivision, you notice a lot of the time they convert one of the model houses into an office. Have you ever seen that before? Where they take the garage for the model house and they convert it to an office. And then once they sell out the community, that's the last one to be sold. They convert it back into a house, and it's an inventory home. And usually that's the one you want to buy because it has all the upgrades in it, unless they snatch out all the upgrades. Sometimes they do that as well. But let's move on. Go to page 91 once again, and we see very simple subject, guys. Office what? Yeah. Active real estate brokers must display an official sign on the exterior or the entrance. Interior of the entrance. And it must be visible as you enter. That's what it says here. Easily observed as you enter the office. That's very simple to understand, but the sign must contain some information. And if you look at the sign, the plaque outside of this office, it contains this information, which is required. What's the first? Trade name, right? Trade name is a business name. It's your fictitious name. It's whatever name that you register with the state of Florida for you to operate your business under. Whatever you want to call your business. But that has to be officially registered with the state of Florida. So you display trade name, broker's name, and the words licensed real estate broker. Anything else is additional, unnecessary. So this is how you might be tested on your exam. Let me give you a hypothetical question. Which of the following information is not required to be on an office sign? And they'll give you 4 choices. You see the lines? 4 lines? A, B, C, and D. What's not required? The broker associate is not required for obvious reasons, right? So trade name, broker's name, licensed real estate broker. Any questions here? On page 92, advertising key concepts. Here's the most important feature when advertising yourself. And by the way, any successful real estate professional will tell you, if you're not rolling at least 10% of your earnings back into marketing, promoting yourself, advertising, then you're crazy, okay? It's just gonna make it that much harder for you to grow. Unless you already have a following and you are a brand, an existing brand, then it's an easy transition into real estate because you already have the eyes on you. But if you want to get the eyes, you have to be involved in some form of advertising, and you can go crazy. Think about all the different ways that people advertise themselves. I've done everything under the sun. I've at least done everything that's on this list within the paragraph. Look what it says here: promotional items, refrigerator magnets, notepads. I've done that. Check this out on line 15, stationery, flyers, business cards, signs. Yes, I've had a billboard. Yes, I've been a newspaper. Yes, I've been a magazine. Internet, of course. Social media is included in that. Radio jingles. I used to be a music producer, so I made some radio jingles. You know the peanut butter jelly song? Peanut butter jelly, peanut butter. So just substitute it for Cameron Academy. Okay? It was a real thing, by the way. Anyhow, I've done television back when it was Bright House. Now there's Spectrum. It was Bright House, yeah. Advertise with them. So you can go crazy, and there's so many different ways, but you have to be clever, unique, stick out from the pack, and that's how you get the eyes on you. We're talking about magnets people put on the side of their cars, wrapping your car. I wrapped my car and company stuff as well. So you can be clever. And even what's working for people now is using old school methods because people thought it was just dead and gone. But Ryan will tell you, if you walk past this room here, you'll see like a lot of mail equipment. One of their agents sends out like 10,000 letters a month, physical letters to people, and just writes, thinking about selling your house on one sheet of paper, and sends it out to people and converts like 60 listings a year just based off of that. Yeah, yeah. It's the most they spend is really in postage because, and even that is, they can drive down the cost if you're mailing in bulk. But there's a strategic way that they're doing it. I think that's very clever because people forget that those methods still might work. And depending on if you're appealing to a certain generation of people, like the younger generation, they don't care about junk mail. They'll throw it directly in the garbage. But if you're trying to go after a certain demographic, maybe they like a piece of mail that looks handwritten and so forth, and they're willing to open up. You understand what I'm saying? You got to get in the psychology of it. And then it starts opening up these opportunities and ideas. Anyhow, hopefully I'm not boring you with this, but look, all advertisements must include the license name of the what? That is the most important feature and a common theme for these requirements we're going to see, because you can do all kinds of advertising. Have you ever seen teams within a brokerage company? Like, I'll make it up. Brian could probably tell you some of the teams that exist in his brokerage, but maybe if it was my brokerage, it would be the Cameron team at Cameron Realty. But what is that team? Usually it's a veteran, a seasoned sales associate that's creating a team within the brokerage company. And they want to attract some of their coworkers or recruit new people from outside the brokerage into their team. They're still going to be active under the same broker, but they have a team within that they're managing a group of persons, and maybe they're giving them leads and showing them how to convert the leads. Because maybe this agent, because they've been in the business, they found a strategy that works and they're overwhelmed with leads. They need help. So they bring people onto their team and they take a percentage of their commission because they're giving them free money, basically. Leads, if you give somebody a lead, that's free money. And then you take a percentage off of it. Just something to consider. But once again, the theme is still consistent. You must include the name of the employing broker within the ad. Any questions about that? It says teams must perform license activities under supervision of the registered broker. When they advertise, including the name of the brokerage. I'm trying to find out. It's right here again. Look, on line 2 and 3. I just wanted you to see how much they repeat the same information. They really want to drive this point home. So yes, you can advertise your team name, but you cannot exclude your brokerage company name. Your brokerage company name has to be on your advertisements, any form of advertisement, even social media. Just think about that. Find a space for it. Maybe the logo. Bring it to your brokerage company. Ask them, is this acceptable? My policy, if I were to hire a new agent, I require them to bring me any marketing material for approval before they send it out into the world, because I want to make sure the branding is consistent and make sure that they're not degrading the brand. Does that make sense? Putting pixelated versions of the logo out there and not high resolution, not high quality, it makes us look bad. So I want to make sure it's done right. Anyhow, this is a little bit petty. It says, the team name cannot be larger than the brokerage company name. Just so you know. Anyhow, real estate team names cannot include, well, they can include team or group. So you can call yourself a team or a group, but you cannot include these names I'm highlighting, which is on this chart, this figure 5.3, like agency, like brokerage, like company, because then you're giving the appearance to the public that you are the brokerage company and you're just a team. Same thing for you as a sales associate. You have to include the name of the brokerage company, and we'll see more of that right here. Look, our advertisements must include the name of the brokerage. If a licensee uses their personal name, they have to at least include their last name as registered with the beeper. You're allowed to use a nickname as long as you include your last name as well. That's okay, but be professional, okay? Because we all grew up with crazy names, nicknames. You understand what I'm talking about? Yes. My wife, she grew up with, and it's very contrary to how my wife, her physical appearance is, not that I'm going to get too deep into it, but she grew up with the nickname Gorda, okay? And you know what that means, right? You want to help us out? It means fat girl. It means fat. It means, let's just call it what it is. It means fat girl. But she never, I mean, there was a small period in her life, maybe she was a fat baby. Yeah. And then for the rest of her life, teens and all that, she's always been skinny. But they continue calling her that. And I'm just like, is that okay for you? Like, and in the Hispanic culture, to be fair, that's a very common thing. And I was like, that's gotta like eat at you, because they call her sister Beba, like babe, like baby, like pretty girl, like like, and then they call my wife fat girl. So it's like, all right, well, like, what's going on here? And I was like, you gotta stand up for yourself. This is not right. But you're not going to put like that on a business card, is what I'm telling you. I have a friend growing up, his family called him Booby. His whole family called him Booby. He's not going to put that on a business card or a for sale sign. You're not going to get any business from that, okay? It'll stand out. It'll get eyes, but they'll be like, okay, I'm not listing my house Booby. Just saying. The address and telephone number does not have to be included. It's not a mistake. It's not like I'm thinking, oh, it's Bobby. No, they were calling him Booby. Booby, yeah. His nickname. There you go. And he'll grow up and realize, I don't want to be called Booby anymore. I'm just not comfortable with it. Anyhow, I saw somebody, I was in Putnam County. I don't know if you know where Putnam County is in Florida. I was in Putnam County, and somebody was running for city commissioner in Putnam County. And their nickname was Booby. They had it on the sign. Running for commissioner. So like Huey Booby Jackson or whatever the name was. And I was like, okay. Maybe that's a normal thing out in the sticks, but anyhow. All advertisements. You have to include the name of the brokerage. If you don't, what happens? Look, on line 15. Advertisements must clearly reveal the license. This is the 4th or 5th time I've shown you that, right? We see it again and again. It's for a reason. It's by design. The book does a lot of repeating. You might have noticed that. If you don't, what if you fail to do so? Look at the next sentence. It's blind advertisement, guys. That's how they describe it, which is a type of false advertising. Have you heard of false advertising? You're advertising information in a false or misleading manner. It's not true, for instance. In real estate, that's a 2nd-degree misdemeanor. Yes, we'll talk about this in Unit 6. So if you promote yourself as a real estate professional, you just put a point of contact information. Might be me going ahead here. All right, I'll describe it to you. You put a point of contact information, a catchy phrase, need to sell your home, I can help. Your phone number, a cheesy picture of yourself, right? And you do not include the name of the brokerage company. That's false advertising.
Is it the brokerage name or the broker as well?
The name of the brokerage firm. Yeah. So the name of the brokerage company for which you are operating under, if they require that be through a logo, then that's what you display. But it has to be included. Otherwise, once again, it's false advertising. You don't want to mess around with that stuff. If we continue on, go to page 94. False advertising. I already mentioned this to you, right? It's a misdemeanor of the what degree? Yeah. And this goes for all forms of advertising, guys. Any questions here? Lines 11 and 12. If I can move on to page 95, we're almost at break. As I mentioned, all forms of advertising. Internet sites includes social. And you can get free handles on all social media sites, X, Facebook, Twitter, well, I already said X, Instagram, and so forth, but include the name of the brokerage company somewhere or their logo on your profile picture somewhere. Yes.
So it'll be effective free, but will they revoke their license?
Your license could be jeopardized, yes. And we'll talk about it. That's going to be in Unit 6, which is today. Unit 6 is all about complaints, violations, and penalties, which is pretty straightforward. This, on line 7, this is simple. Don't call yourself a realtor unless you have a current membership. Isn't that simple? You might be tested on that for your state exam, but isn't that an easy question? If you're advertising yourself as a realtor, but you haven't renewed your membership, you have to take down everything that says realtor, right? Otherwise, not only is it false advertising, but the word realtor has an R within a circle next to it. What does that mean? It's a registered what? So that could be trademark what? Infringement, if you've heard of that. When you are listing your own property or purchasing property, but you also have a real estate license, and a lot of you mentioned that you want to invest and you're planning to do so. Maybe you want to use your license to get a better deal, to have first access to those properties that are going to get listed coming soon and so forth. Anyhow, you have to, at first point of meaningful negotiation, you'll see it right here, because a licensee has superior knowledge and expertise to reduce liability when you're selling the property for sale by owner. You can put that sign in the front yard, guys. You could put for sale by owner, even though you're a licensed real estate professional. You're not lying. You're still the owner and you're selling it yourself. You can even list it through your brokerage company and put it on the MLS and still have the for sale by owner sign in the front yard. However, at first point of serious negotiations, you have to disclose, hey, by the way, I'm also a real estate licensee. Why? Didn't we just read out why? You have superior knowledge and expertise. You know exactly what to do to benefit yourself within the real estate transaction, correct? And I assume you have a fiduciary relationship alliance with yourself, correct? So you're going to look out for your best interests. And you are not to represent a buyer that is interested in your property. You can prepare the agreements, but even then, I think that would be a little bit, because you're going to structure the agreement to hit all the notes that benefit you, right? Any questions about this? Now, luckily, when you list property in the MLS, there is a designation for that. You can click a button that says you're also the owner of the property, listing it as a real estate professional, as a realtor. So that way, when real estate agents that are representing buyers, they're looking in the database, they can see, oh, when I call the listing agent, I know that they're actually the owner, and maybe we can get this deal done a little bit quicker. They don't have to present it to anybody. They can make the final decision, right? Anyhow, let's continue on. Telephone solicitation. Let's talk about this and just a couple more things, and then we'll take a break. Is that all right? All right. So what is telemarketing? Yeah, it's randomly bothering strangers for the purpose of selling goods and services. There's always at least one in here who sold over the phone. One of us, okay? So you're to blame. No, just kidding. I'm glad you're brave enough to admit it. Now, you could probably tell us all kinds of stories, right? I've had students that were like, did debt collection over the phone. We love receiving those phone calls or whatever the case may be. So you have to comply with federal laws and even state laws when soliciting people over the phone, trying to sell goods and services. Most people don't know about these, and they just start cold calling people from a list they purchase online, but don't realize that maybe you're not allowed to call those people. That's what we're going to see within this next section. And this goes for text messages as well, by the way. This is governed by the TCPA, the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. And nationally, we created a list that you can put your number on that prevents these types of calls. It's called the National DNC list, not Democratic National Convention, but do not call list or registry to avoid receiving those phone calls and texts. And the FCC is the one that enforces compliance. FCC is the Federal Communications Commission. I don't know if you're aware of that. We don't see it in front of us, but I'm just sharing with you. And they can only call you during a certain time period. You might not know this, but don't worry. It's only between 8 a.m. and 9 p.m., basically the whole flipping day. I mean, come on. Can it get any more broad than this? But they do have to be aware of time zones. So if they're calling you from California, they have to know that they have to comply with Florida time zones, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. And if you catch these violators, that's the question. Is there a simple way to catch them? Good luck. They got blockers, deflectors, all kinds of ways to not get caught. And they get fined per illegal call. Last time I checked, it was $16,000 per illegal call. They might have increased it, but the government, the federal government, is very incompetent when it comes to enforcing against violators. I think there was like last year over $4 million in penalties and fines. They were only able to collect like $5,000 out of that. I mean, imagine. So very hard to catch these individuals, these perpetrators. If we go to the next page, page 96, is that right? Yeah. We're talking about cold calling, guys. When you cold call a list that you obtained online or you paid for, you got to make sure that you scrub the list. This is how they describe it in the telemarketing world, if you're in that type of sales. Scrubbing the list means removing all the people that are on the do not call list. But there's a national list, and there's even a list for Florida specifically. Because realistically speaking, just if I can just talk to you, just a real quick conversation about it. If somebody calls you to try to sell you something over the phone, are you going to take them to federal court over that phone call or text message? Probably not. So, as you can imagine, it's more difficult to enforce on a federal level. That's why here in the state of Florida, we've done a really good job of adopting several federal laws into state law to make it easier to enforce against violators. So here in Florida, we created a separate list, and it doesn't cost any money to put your number on this list. It used to, now it's free. It's maintained by the Department of Agriculture, like where you try to get a concealed weapons permit, but that's not required now. You don't need a concealed weapons permit. Did you know that in the state of Florida? I think as of like July. But anyhow. So they maintain this list, and it's called the Florida No Sales Solicitation List. You can place up to 2 numbers on this list per account. And violators are, if you can catch them, are penalized per illegal call. Last time I checked, it was about $10,000 per illegal call. 10 or 11. On line 15, the major difference between the state and federal law is that Florida law exempts real estate licensees who solicit listings in response to for sale by owner yard signs. So here in Florida, you can solicit FSBOs that put those signs in the front yard, even if their number is on the do not call list. Yeah. I'm talking about in Florida. The numbers on the national, not the national, the state list. But every time you learn a rule, you learn the what to the rule. So there's exceptions to the federal law. Sorry about the federal law, the national do not call list, where you can still call people and solicit them without any penalty. I'm going to give you 3 that are not obvious or in front of us. Charities can still call you without being in violation. Telephone surveying companies can still call you. And political texts and phone calls are acceptable without being in violation. That's going on right now. I've received so many. Yes?
Crazy.
Yes. To vote for whoever it is in local and federal election. They're not in violation. They receive an exception. But now let's talk about the ones in front of us. For the national list, not the Florida list. For the national list, you can call for sale by owners, like if they have that sign in the front yard, but only if you have a serious buyer, not to try to list their property for them or try to get them additional exposure by putting it in the MLS. If you can prove you have a business relationship with somebody in the past, how many months? 18 months, you can call them even if they're on the national do not call list. And lastly, do you remember open houses and the purpose they serve? Is to try to get buyer leads, right? And when they walk through the front door, you make sure that you get them to what? Yeah, make sure they sign in. You can solicit that list of sign-in contacts that you gathered from prospective buyers for up to how many months? 3 months after collecting that contact information. Any questions about that?
So these exemptions only apply to the federal.
Federal. And then you'll see right here as a quick reference, there's a major difference between Florida law and federal law regarding calling people, soliciting people over the phone. Any questions about this? You see this? The FSBO, it's the major difference between the two. All right. On the next page, I'll be brief here on page 97. Electronic mail, what is that? Thank you. Why did it say email? Like we don't know what electronic mail is or what email stands for. So when you email people, you can't just blast out to some random contacts a list that you purchase online. You have to make sure that these people opted into receiving those email blasts. And then also you have to clearly put a subject that reflects what you're trying to accomplish. Can't be deceptive. Also the content within, and you have to give them an opt-out, like the unsubscribe button. And I love I don't know if you have an iPhone or not, but on the iPhone now, they have a button at the top. When you check your emails, you could unsubscribe without having to go through all of those prompts at the bottom and zoom into the tiny little text where it says unsubscribe and go through all of that madness. Now you can just click with one button and get out. Any questions about this? And you have to remove them within how many days? Yeah, that's on this list. You see here. You see this list. All right, any questions? What I find interesting, though, look at the name of this federal law.
And spam.
Yes.
Can't spam.
Well, the way I remember it is because I have humble beginnings. I don't know about you, but it used to be the cheapest thing in the grocery store, and it could be a meal for your family that night. I mean, I grew up on this stuff, and it's when I think back now that I know what it is and think back to eating it, I'm thinking like, how could I possibly eat this stuff? But it filled up your stomach for the night. And we had struggles. We had those times. So if you don't know what a can of spam is, can I share it with you?
Like dog food.
Basically, it's the ground up seasoned leftover body parts of animals. Okay, mashed in a can. Yeah, that's what hot dogs are for the most part. So yeah, not to gross you out, but it's like the American version of haggis. I don't know if you know what haggis is, but haggis is even the name sounds horrible, but that's a Scottish thing, and it's like leftover body parts of animals, like in a sheep's intestine casing. Anyhow, I don't want to gross you out with this stuff. But if you ever go to Hawaii, has anybody been to Hawaii? In Hawaii, it's a big thing because, okay, you got to think about Hawaii. Everything is shipped to Hawaii. All right. So that means the cost of groceries are astronomical. And the cheapest thing was Spam. And not everybody is rich in Hawaii. Okay. Hate to break it to you. There are very impoverished areas in Hawaii, and they have whole restaurant concepts dedicated towards Spam. Spam and eggs is a big thing over there. Hot dogs, mainly. Arroz angandules with hot dogs. I grew up with a lot of Puerto Rican friends. Yeah, it's a big thing. Little ketchup, rice, some beans, hot dogs, dice it up. Anyhow. Yep, I'm glad I got to grocery out right before the break, but let's take a break. And then when we come back, we'll continue on page 99. I want you guys to take a quick 10-minute break. Be back at 6:15. 6:15. Stretch out, grab a snack, do what you got to do.
Hi, my name is Crystal Rivera, and I'm a realtor with Live Realty at Nona. I decided to be a real estate agent for my love of helping others, thinking about helping them with their first home, with their first apartment, with their first investment property. Flipping homes is what started me in the business. My husband is into flipping homes, so I went from nursing, which I'm still currently doing, but now going into real estate. Decided to use Academy because of my nursing schedule and how their schedule works well with my schedule. Did not expect to be prepared as I was. Michael was amazing. He prepared me in 2 weeks to take the test, literally 5 days after I completed the class. And 3 days after that, I was already signed with Live Realty. And here we are 5 weeks later, and I have my first listing. So definitely prepared me well for the real estate industry and just all that's to come. I'm excited, and I wish everybody luck.
Hey, my name's Jonathan Gibson. I am from Orlando, Florida. I had started my career in real estate based on wanting to... I started out my journey in real estate with Academy Accredited because I read a lot of online reviews, and there were exceptional reviews about Cameron. When I got here, I wasn't disappointed at all. I realized Michael was the best teacher, and he helped me learn everything I needed to know about real estate. And he's a very good instructor. He's thorough. He tells everything. He's one of the better professors. He's good at explaining stuff, helping you get through this and making it easy for everything. And I wanted to do real estate because I read some books and I bought homes, and I wanted to start renting out my property. And I know we had, based on my research online from Google and everything, I knew I had to do a school for Florida and do the 63-hour course. And I looked it up, came to Academy Academy. It's been the best thing ever. He's helped us with connections. He's brought in different realtors and brokers, plus find work after the academy. So if you're wanting to learn anything about real estate, I would definitely recommend Academy Academy.
Hi, my name is Tamara Fletcher, and And I have experience in education. I've worked in education for over 17 years, but I always wanted to get into real estate. And I wanted to get into real estate because I love a couple of things. I love people, I love making money, and I love being able to sell homes, or at least the potential of selling homes. I love real estate. That's what brought me to Cameron Academy. Cameron Academy has done so much for me. I have learned so much from Michael. The information that I've gained here has made me feel so prepared for the state exam as well as the exam at the end of the course. I can't go on enough about how enthusiastic Michael was during the whole process of learning and how that really made a difference in the way that I learn. Being able to be here in person and take the in-person classes is what has really made it all the difference in the world. Michael is a great instructor. I saw great reviews about him and his instruction here at Cameron Academy, and I am really happy to say that all of those positive reviews are true, 1,000%. It's made a world of difference for me, and if I could do it again, I would.
My name is Gabriel Minyarji. I've been in the restaurant industry for the past 25 years, now getting the residential investment opportunity. I found Cameron Academy to be very helpful in my new endeavor. Michael Cameron has been very, very helpful, knowledgeable, provided very new and efficient information to help me endeavor my career. I'm very, very pleased and satisfied that I found Cameron Academy and the knowledge that I gained from them and for all my future endeavors. I highly, highly, highly recommend them. I definitely give them a 5-star plus.
My name is Dennis Duen. I came to the Cameron Academy. My mentor, he also he told me go directly to Cameron Academy. They are very, very good, and that's how he got his license. And he advised me to go to that school. And when I came, so far, it was the best decision that I made. The instructor Michael was very, very good. He's very good, and it would benefit me. Very knowledgeable. So I want to say thank you to him. And I think I will pass because of him. I will pass both school exam and the state exam. So it was the best decision that I made. Michael was very good, and I want to say thank you to him. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Samuel Ramirez. I'm an electrician. I got into real estate to get into my own deals and to see if I can sell some real estate for commission on the sides. Cameron Academy taught me a lot of things. It taught me different things that I didn't know about real estate. It cleared up some misconceptions that I had. Michael was a great teacher. He taught me a lot about real estate that I didn't know, and it just opened my eyes a lot more and made me just very motivated to get into this. And I think anyone should go to Cameron Academy.
Mi nombre es Rolly Peralta y acabo de terminar las clases aquí en la Academia Cameron con el profesor Michael. He aprendido mucho y estoy muy agradecido con Michael por todo lo que me ha enseñado. Yo quiero ser un real estate agent para seguir invirtiendo en el futuro y también ayudar a algunas familias a adquirir sus sueños. Estoy muy agradecido con Michael y invito a todas las personas a venir a esta academia.
大家好，我叫 Rudy 我很开心能够跟 Michael 上学，因为他在real estate 这方面学到了给我很多知识，我也很开心能够选到他，因为不是每个人都可以教你，他能够教你的东西，他有很多的实力，有很多的经验，而且很风趣，所以对于我来讲是一件非常幸运的事情。那我个人想做房地产投资，所以我必须要有最专业的知识去帮助我自己。很幸运的能够选到 Michael， 所以我希望大家以后能够给他一个机会去跟他做投资，不会让你丢钱，这个很重要。所以祝你们好运，希望能以后见到你们，谢谢，拜拜。
In an era where online education often falls short, there's an oasis transforming the digital learning landscape. Welcome to Cameron Academy. With our AI-powered platform, we're not just changing the game, we're rewriting the rules. At Cameron Academy, we're not just elevating education, we're lifting learners to new heights. Our comprehensive video lessons and AI tutors simplify complex real estate concepts. At Cameron Academy, we do more than prepare you for your exams. We equip you with the essential knowledge for a successful career in real estate. Break away from the traditional. Think computerized exams. A convenient study app at your fingertips and AI support, but wait, that's not all. Live chat support when you need it, AI-driven text-to-speech content, your own personal AI tutor, and instant online certifications. This isn't just education. This is the future. We're reimagining what it means to ascend to success in the real estate industry. Choose Cameron Academy, the oasis of innovative learning. Your journey to success starts here.
Yeah, the earnest money deposit, the EMD is how we described it. And you'll see that confirmed on line 2. Typically, when a buyer makes an offer with real property, they include with the offer a deposit to show good faith that the buyer is serious about purchasing the property. We know that. We described that yesterday. We see it again. It's confirmed for us. A deposit, if you're not already familiar with what it is, I'm pretty sure most of us understand what the deposit is. It's a sum of money or its equivalent delivered to a real estate licensee as earnest money. That's why it might be called an earnest money deposit, EMD, or payment or partial payment in connection with a real estate transaction. And it goes by a few other names just so we're not confused. Deposit, good faith deposit, escrow deposit, binder deposit, trust money, trust funds. And this money, the way that we account for it as a real estate professional, and not so much us as a sales associate, but a broker, is to hold the money in a separate escrow account. If you're not familiar with what an escrow account is, it's a business account you set up, used specifically to hold on to other people's money. In this case, the money that you're holding on to as a broker is the buyer's deposit throughout the duration of the transaction until the closing date. Then that money is going to be dispersed. The buyer will get credit for that money towards the purchase price. That's what we see here. Hence the term trust funds, because it's held in trust. That's why it might be placed in a trust account, escrow account. All right. There's a lot of interesting information about this. Look at what it says here. It says earnest money deposits associated with sale transactions. Some brokers, or in addition to sale transactions, some brokers hold trust money, deposits for others associated with a leasing the property, such as rental deposits, security deposits, last month's rent in advance. So as a broker, I also have property management services I provide. And if I didn't have property management services, if I could just tell you personally, I would not have an escrow account. Florida law does not require that I have an escrow account for me to proceed with my operations as a real estate brokerage company. It's not required that I hold on to the buyer's money throughout the duration of the transaction, even though that's what we're going to learn about right now. And this is the information that I'm going to share with you. It is not required. And thank God it's not required, because why would I want to take on the liability of holding on to somebody else's money? Money equals liability. We realize that, right? Why would I do that if I don't have to? So who's going to hold on to this deposit money? That's the question, right? In real life, contrary to what you're going to be tested on mostly, and what we're going to learn about here, it's kind of like beating a dead horse, is that, and you completed a real estate transaction, you're a homeowner, you know about this, either a Florida-based title company will coordinate the closing of a real estate transaction and hold on to this money and release it when the time comes, or a Florida-based attorney can provide that service of helping a buyer and a seller coordinate the closing of a real estate transaction. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's how I prefer to operate. Let them hold on to that money. That way I don't have to touch it and take on that liability or the responsibility of keeping track of time periods for distribution of money. Imagine if I'm doing 100 deals for my brokerage office and I'm holding on to all this money. It's a lot, it's tedious. So if I can get your attention, once again, this is very important for exam purposes. What you're going to be tested on mainly, I want you to assume that the broker is holding on to this deposit money throughout the duration of the transaction, even though that's contrary to what we see in real life, unless they tell you otherwise, unless they say it's a title company or an attorney. There's a separate set of rules for them. But just assume, if they don't say title company or attorney, I'm going to repeat it again, assume that the broker is holding on to the money. Because what we're mainly going to learn about and be tested on is the rules for the broker concerning this deposit money. Acceptable depositories, class exam question here. It says the broker, we're saying broker, right, can hold the money in a Florida commercial bank, credit union, or savings association. That's where they can set up the escrow account. Florida law does not require that brokers open an escrow account. Didn't I just mention that to you? And it says brokers that don't want the responsibility or liability of holding on to other people's money will use a Florida-based title company or a Florida what? Attorney. Let them hold on to the money. In other states, like New York, for instance, in New York, they only use lawyers to coordinate the closing of a real estate transaction. But here in Florida, we have two options. You could use a lawyer or you could use a title company. We have licensed title companies that provide that service. Immediately defined. So let's talk about this next section. When must you, as a sales associate or broker associate, turn the money over to your broker when you receive this deposit from a prospective buyer? So let's talk about this. You're working with a buyer, you submit an offer for them on their behalf for a property that they're interested in. The seller accepts the offer. So typically, if you look at a sale contract, and I can pull one up, it's on the first page. How much of a deposit is the buyer willing to give as a placeholder while they do their inspections and so forth? And within how much time after the offer is accepted are they going to give the deposit? That's on the first page. You can't miss it. So within that time period, they might give the deposit over to you, the sales associate. What do you do with this money? Immediately turn it over to your what? To your broker. You have to understand what immediately is defined as for exam purposes. You're going to be tested on this. And it says by the end of the next what? Yeah, and even rental deposits if you're providing property management services for your brokerage company. Because as a sales associate, you can help your broker with property management if they have that company set up. So you might be receiving the last month's rent and security deposit from a tenant, and then you have to turn it over to your broker by the end of the next business day. You'll see that here. No later than by the end of the next business day. Do weekends or holidays count as business days? Just so we're clear on this. No. And if the office closes at 5 p.m., that means you better get the deposit into the office before what? 5 p.m., before they close. What if the broker's not in the office? Do you have to wait for the broker to show up? No, because the broker doesn't have to be tied to the office, tethered. You can even turn the money over to an office what? Receptionist, unlicensed personal assistant of that brokerage company. We'll see this confirmed for us once again at the end of the unit, but let me give you a hypothetical, typical state exam question based on these time periods if they're going to test you on that. You're a sales associate. You collect a deposit from a buyer on Friday. Monday is Martin Luther King Day. When do you have to turn it over to your broker? By the end of business on Tuesday. Because Friday is when you got the money. You have to turn it over by the end of the next business day. Well, the weekend is not a business day. Skip that. And then I said Monday is a holiday. Skip that. So it's by the end of business on Tuesday. That's how you're going to be tested. What's in front of us. But that's for you, the sales associate. What about the broker? You have to learn the time period that the broker has to comply with to put the money in the account. And you'll see it here. Immediately for the broker. What is it defined as? It says no later than by the end of the what? Third business day after you got the money from the associate. So the 3 business days start the day after the associate collected it from the buyer, for instance. Let me give you an example of this as to how you might be tested if I can get your attention for just a moment. An associate collects a deposit on Tuesday morning, turns it over to their broker the same afternoon. Thursday is a holiday. When does the broker have to put the money in the escrow account? The day it was collected was what day? What did I say? Tuesday. Does that day count for the broker?
No.
The 3 days start on the next. So I said Wednesday. Thursday's a holiday, skip it. Friday, skip the weekend. Monday, end of the 3rd business day. You see how tricky that might be if you're not paying attention and you don't remember these details? So that's how you're going to be tested. Are you with me on that? You have couple practice questions about these time periods tonight as well for your homework. And we'll go through it. We're going to review again tomorrow. So let's move on. Let's actually go to the bottom of the next page, which is page 100. And we see personal checks, post-dated checks, insufficient funds. When we're talking about personal checks, we're talking about a mistake that the buyer might make by writing a check made out to you, the sales associate, instead of the name of the brokerage company that's going to hold on to this deposit in their escrow account. So that's obviously a mistake, but you're going to be tested on this. And a lot of your exam is testing your ethics. You'll have answers where it says, deposit the money into your account, or cash the money in your account and turn the cash over to your broker by the end of the next business day. This is inaccurate, and those are incorrect procedures. What's the best course of action? Well, if they made a mistake and wrote the check out to your name, get them to rewrite a whole nother what? Check made payable to the correct account, the escrow account. You'll see that here. Best course of action, rewrite a whole nother check. However, if it's not practical to do that, they wrote the check and they left town. The associate, look at the end of line 20, should immediately endorse the check. What does it mean to endorse the check? Sign the back and include the words "for deposit only" made out to the name of the broker's escrow account. I don't know of any any bank that would accept that alternative, by the way, where you endorse the back and then sign it over, unless the broker made you a signatory on the account. Do you know what it means to be made a signatory on the account? It means the broker is giving you access. What broker is going to give their associates access to the escrow account to withdraw money and so forth? So probably the only course of action is to rewrite a whole nother check. But let's unpack that for a second. Do you think buyers are going to be writing you checks? Isn't that a very old way of doing it? It's just not practical. And in real life, because we know that most likely a title company is going to be involved, what's the title company's procedures? I can tell you. The title company is not going to accept a check. It's rare that they would. They would provide instructions to your buyer via email, and the instructions would allow the buyer to go onto their bank online. And how would they transfer the money over to the title company? They'd wire it. So you don't have to deal with any of this stuff, time periods and all of these things. Isn't it a hassle for no reason? Let the title company deal with it. On the next page, page 101, post-dated checks and insufficient funds. What's a post-dated check? Do you know? A check that's not valid until a future date. But here in Florida, the rules have changed. We don't care. In Florida does not care if you write a check for a later date. I don't know if you're familiar with that. If you write it for a week later, the person doesn't have to wait a week. They can deposit it immediately. Now, if you have an agreement in real estate, this is how it's handled. First of all, let's even ask the question, is a post-dated check acceptable in our business as a deposit for purchase of real property? What do you think? Imagine the buyer says, hey, you remember that $5,000 deposit that I said I was going to give? Here's a check for it, but can you wait to the end of the week before you deposit it? Well, wait a second. It's only $5,000. You're trying to buy a $500,000 house. You're having trouble coming up with the first $5,000. Are you ready to purchase this property? That's the bigger question you should be asking. Anyhow, I digress. It's a red flag is what I'm saying. But is it acceptable in our business? The answer is, would surprise you, it's yes. Who must give permission before accepting a post-dated check? You would think it's the broker, but the deposit is not for the broker's property. It's for whose property? Seller must give approval before accepting a post-dated check. And then just put it in a safe place within the office, like a drawer with a lock on it, until the date on the check becomes current, and then immediately put the money in the escrow account. What's immediately for the broker to do that? End of the third business day, after the date on the check becomes current. So if it becomes current on a Friday, you got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, they put it in the escrow. Okay. What you're tested on for 69 is insufficient funds. If you comply with the rules that we just got done talking about, you're not liable if the money doesn't clear. But if you neglect these duties and don't follow these procedures, comply with the time periods, then you could be liable for money not clearing. Unfortunately, this is the rule, and that's what you're going to be tested on. They call it culpable negligence, guilty of being careless. Is it free to open up a bank account? Exactly. Technically, it's not, right? You always have to deposit some type of personal funds, or if you're a broker, some operating funds into the account to set it up. So you have to maintain like a minimum balance. Have you heard of that before? On top of that, what about check printing fees, service fees, and maintenance fees, whatever they want to disguise them as, especially for business accounts, they deduct that every single month. Wiring fees and all these things. So for that reason, if we can move a little bit further down, it says money to maintain the escrow account. I'm going to bounce around a little bit. The commission allows that brokers use up to how much of their personal or operating funds to set up the escrow account? It says in sale transactions, guys, in sale transactions. But for property management, if you move a little bit further down, look what it says on line 35. If the broker is doing property management, they can use more money to set up and maintain the account. How much? $5,000. The question I get from time to time is, okay, Michael, you're a broker. If you had an escrow account, do you have to set up a separate escrow account for every single transaction you're doing? No, that'd be crazy. Okay, you only need one escrow account to hold on to multiple deposits. And Florida does not require that you keep deposits that you receive from buyers separate from deposits you receive from tenants. But still, you see right here, it does not require separate accounts. But still, you cannot go over how much if you're maintaining both type of deposits in the same escrow account. No more than 5,000. Any questions on this? Okay. We'll talk about what happens if you go over those dollar figures, those limits, those thresholds. But now let's go up. You know what a signatory is, right? Broker is giving them access, giving somebody access. But check this out on line 18. A broker's escrow account may be interest-bearing or what? Non-interest-bearing. Do you know the difference? Non-interest-bearing means the money's just going to sit there. It'll collect dust, but it won't collect interest. If you set up an interest-bearing account, it could possibly gain what? Yeah, the money that you're holding on to, whatever it is, could possibly gain interest. But is it even worth it? I would say no, because then they tack on more regulation if you're making interest off of somebody else's money. Because escrow accounts you're holding on to other people's money, right? Look at the regulation, and you'll see why you shouldn't even deal with this. It says, first of all, you got to get permission from all parties involved. That's number one. And on line 21, you have to get written permission or specify who keeps the interest earned. What happens if you don't? Well, look what it says here at the end of line 22. Continues on line 23. You can be disciplined by what? By FREC if you don't do so. Any questions on this? We'll talk about complaints, violations, and penalties in Unit 6. How long must you retain records for? Yep. Page 102. 5 years. Same thing. Nothing new here. Any questions about that? On that same page, line 9, mishandling this money. This is important to know about. There's an illegal act called conversion. Conversion. This is when you are essentially spending someone else's money without their permission. That's what it means. And you'll see it here. Look, it's called misappropriation of funds. Conversion. Unauthorized use of somebody's personal property. Money is personal property. In this case, we're talking about the escrowed funds, the deposit money. There's a title company that just got in trouble with this. They were called Celebration Title. Look them up. They were using deposits. It was a title company, not a broker, holding on to deposits for buyers, and they were using the money for business purposes, marketing, whatever they were doing. Yeah, and it was not a big surprise as to how they expanded so fast with so much exposure in the market because they were using deposit money to fund their business. That's a huge no-no, and that got shut down. Big lawsuits. Anyhow, so that's an illegal act called conversion. If you do it on purpose or by accident, doesn't matter. It's still illegal. And commingling. Let's talk about this. This is when you mix. You mix escrowed funds with the broker's personal or operating funds. So let me unpack this real quick. Just a moment ago, we talked about the maximum that a broker can use to set up and maintain the account. For sale transactions, not property management, no more than what? $1,000 to set up and pay for maintenance. If you go over that amount, it's illegal. It's called commingling. For property management escrow accounts, no more than how much? $5,000 to set up and maintain the account. If you go over that $5,000 threshold, that's illegal. It's called what? Commingling. You're mixing. On purpose or by accident, doesn't matter. It's illegal. Any questions about that? It's when we talked about money to maintain the escrow account just a moment ago. Anyhow, on page 103, not only could you be charged with mean, you could be charged with multiple things: larceny. You could be charged, which is a legal term for theft, culpable negligence, guilty of being careless, conversion, commingling, and even failing to account for and deliver, not keeping track of the money. Any questions on this? Legal documents, real estate commissions. It covers a lot of things that you might be able, you might not be able to account for and deliver. What if you use the services of a title company or an attorney and they're going to hold on to the escrowed funds, the deposit money? You have to follow the procedures that we see here on these bullet points. Highlight these 3. I'll be brief here. Says the real estate licensee who prepared or presented the sale contract has to put the name, address, and telephone number of the title company or attorney. And it must be displayed on the sale contract. I mentioned that to you. It's on the first page of the sale contract. It's called the escrow agent. That's how they describe it on a sale contract. Who's holding on to the money? How much money are you gonna give? When are you gonna give this money once the offer is accepted? And who's holding on to the money? First page. And within how many business days does it say here? Yes, you must request or obtain written verification that the title company has the money when it was wired over to them. The title company automatically does this. They have to comply with these same rules. So even though you might be tested on it, the title company has to give it to you within 10 days. Otherwise, they're in violation. But they give it to you instantly. As soon as the deposit hits the escrow account, they receive a notification, they get pinged, and then they give you a PDF. This is the money we received. Here's who we received it from, for what purpose. It's time-stamped, and they email it to you saying, your buyer did what they said they were going to do in the sale contract. They're in compliance. Here's evidence. But they don't just send it out to you, the buyer's agent. They send it out to the listing agent. So the seller's agent knows that your buyer is complying with the terms of the contract. They turned over the deposit within the appropriate time. And that's the next bullet point. It says, look what it says here on line 40. Provide the seller's broker with a copy of the written verification within the same time period. Any questions about this? I think it's kind of silly that you have to know this because it's not something that you have to comply with. The title company has to comply with this. But regardless, if they're being lazy and it's 2 weeks and you didn't receive any notification like, hey, listen, I didn't receive any evidence that my buyer turned over the deposit, you're not in compliance with the rules. They can be reported. Anyhow, let's move on. Let's go to page 105. Let's go to page 105. We see notice and settlement procedures. And I can just be blunt with you guys real quick and tell you that transactions fail. They fail all the time for various reasons. Maybe you've been involved in these transactions that have failed. It happens. So the reason why I bring this up is because there might be a dispute as to who that deposit goes to. Who's entitled to getting the deposit money? Naturally, the buyer's thinking, well, I want to get my deposit back. But the seller might be thinking, well, the buyer's the reason the transaction failed. And because I wasted my time, I took my property off the market for 30, 45 days to find out they're not able to close. I want to keep their deposit. This happens as well. So let's talk about that circumstance and describe what it's called. It's on the bottom of the page, page 105, line 38. We're describing conflicting what? Yep. Buyer and seller are fighting over the deposit for the real estate transaction. So once again, another reason why when you decide to become a broker in the future, it's probably not wise for you to open up an escrow account is because transactions fail all the time. And if the buyer and the seller are fighting over that money, you're caught in the middle. Maybe even litigation between these two parties, and you're caught in the middle. Like, why deal with that? What, for a little bit of interest you can make off of their deposit? You're not going to make much. Do you understand? In the world of banking here in the United States, at least, $1,000 deposit for a real estate transaction. You're holding on to that $1,000 for what, 30, 45 days? How much interest can it possibly make in that time period? With all the regulation that comes along with it, it's not worth it. So anyhow, I'm venting on you guys. When I become member of the Florida Real Estate Commission, we'll make some changes. Drain the swamp over there, and I'm just kidding. On page 106, if you're caught in the middle as a broker, then you must first notify FREC in writing with what's going on, buyer and seller fighting over the deposit within how many business days? 15 business days. And within 30 business days total, you must initiate one of the 4 settlement or escape procedures. Let me unpack this because you're going to be tested on the time period and it's not what you think. So let's just say conflicting demands starts right here at this line. I'm going to write it down. Conflicting demands. This line is when conflicting demands starts. Within the first 15 days, what must you do? We just read through it. Exactly, notify FREC. And within the first 30 days, what must you do? Start the escape or settlement what? Exactly. Call them escape procedures. Settlement procedures, the key word is settlement. You're trying to settle the matter within 30 days. But this is how you're going to be tested based on the time period. If I can get your attention up here, and you can draw this as well. Yes, you have up to 15 days to do what? To notify who specifically? Yes, notify FREC. But the longer you wait within the first 15 days to notify FREC, the less time you have to start the escape procedures because everything has to be done within how many days? Okay, so let me give you an example of how you might be tested. What if you notify FREC, let's say in 3 days? You had up to 15, but you notified them in the first 3 days. How many days do you have left to start the escape procedures? 27. Basic subtraction. This is how you might be tested. Any questions on this? Here's another example. You notify FREC, let's say in 9 days. How many days do you have left to start the escape procedures? 21, okay? You notify FREC in 14 days. How many days do you have left to start the escape procedures? 16. That's how you might be tested for exam purposes. Any questions here? No questions? Okay. Give you a second to write it down. Draw it out. Okay. Let's continue. So obviously that's what you're going to be tested on for class exam question here. But let's highlight this as well on the same page. Just so you have it, I'll come back to this. This is one of the escape procedures. Okay. And let's move on to the next page. To help us recall the 4 settlement or escape procedures that exist, the options that you have, think of the acronym MAIL. Let's go through each one of these together. The first one we don't like, it's called mediation. Mediation is where the buyer and the seller choose a trusted third party to make a non-binding decision. That's the reason we don't like it, because the decision from this professional mediator that you hire, I don't know if you realize that those positions exist. You can hire, the buyer and the seller would hire a professional mediator to determine who's entitled to getting this deposit money. But their decision is non-binding. It's not legally binding. So one party might disagree with that, and then you're still left unresolved. That's why arbitration is the best in our opinion. It's once again where the buyer and the seller choose a trusted what? Trusted third party a professional arbitrator, but their decision, look in parentheses, is legally what? It's legally binding. And if you look at a typical sale contract, if you use the standard sale contract that is typically used in Florida, it says that if there's a dispute, that buyer and seller agree to go to an arbitrator to resolve. Because of course you want to avoid the next one by all means. It starts with an L, it's what? Yeah, that means I'll see you in what? Who decides now? A judge based on the facts of the case, and their decision is going to be legally what? Binding, but then you have court costs, legal fees, and so forth that you want to avoid. And then the last option here is escrow disbursement what? Yes, we call this EDO for short, EDO. And this is interesting. EDO is asking for, write this down, for whose advice? FREC's advice. So you say, hey, FREC, this is what's going on. Buyer and seller are fighting over the deposit because the transaction failed. Who do you think is entitled to getting this money? So you're asking FREC for their advice rather than going to a professional mediator, arbitrator, and so forth. If you ask FREC for their advice, what do you think? Do you think they have to give advice or they don't have to give advice? They do not. They're not required to give advice. If they give advice, like if you ask it and they provide advice, must you take their advice? What do you think? Non-binding. So that means you don't have to take FREC's advice. If FREC gives advice and you take their advice, even though it's non-binding, but you follow their instructions, and it turns out FREC was wrong, they gave you bad advice, does FREC reimburse you for the bad advice?
No.
You would think that they wouldn't take responsibility, but actually they do. And this is why FREC just chooses not to give advice because they don't want to take on the liability. And we'll talk about how they reimburse you in Unit 6. Unit 6 is, we'll talk about how they accomplish that. However, before I answer your question, to help you remember what this is, if you read it backwards, it makes sense based on what we discussed. Yes, you're getting an order from who? FREC to disperse the what? The deposit, right? The escrowed funds. The earnest money deposit, the escrowed funds. Yes, you had a question.
So would it go in that order?
No,
The
this
first thing first is
you can go straight to arbitration. If that's what you'll see in a typical sale contract and both parties agree to it, then yeah, you could just go straight to arbitration and avoid litigation, avoid mediation. You might have to use more than one of these to resolve. Imagine you start with mediation and both parties can't agree. You don't have to take their advice. You might end up in court, and that's a combination, right? Now, what was that?
why have that option?
Because you might not be using a typical sale contract, and parties might agree to avoid court and not get caught up in legal and the time period, time consumption, and court costs, legal fees. So they might say, okay, let's go to mediation. But do you know, like Judge Judy, Judge Joe Brown, Judge Matheson, and all of these people, these famous court judges, whatever, TV court judges, they are professional arbitrators. They're professional. Did you know? They're professional arbitrators. That's what they're doing. What you see, court TV, it's an arbitration hearing. You might not know this, but you learn something new every day. Cameron Academy of Real Estate, much more than real estate. I got fun facts, pop culture facts, Diddy facts. No, I'm just kidding. That's the crazy. I'm just fascinated by what's going on right now. It's just wild. It's hard not to feed into that type of stuff, and it's just like, oh my gosh. But I'm glad Hollywood is getting exposed. Check this out. Just something that I want you to highlight that's not highlighted here. If you ask FREC for their advice and you're waiting for the response, but meanwhile, you subsequently settle the matter and you no longer need FREC's advice, do you have to let FREC know that, hey, we're good now. We got to take it? Yes, Within how many days do you got to let them know? Yes, and it says the dispute has subsequently been settled. Yes, you'll see right here, FREC has to be notified within 10 business days. Very simple, straightforward. Any questions about that? And once again, if you can't see, you can always sit here right in front. Let's continue on. We're almost at break. Go to page 107 again, and we see exemptions to notice and settlement procedures. So if I can break this down for you and simplify it, essentially this title means, when do you not have to notify FREC and go through the escape procedures? Well, look up here. What we're talking about is if the transaction fails and the buyer is entitled to getting their money back, no questions asked, then why do you have to go through notifying FREC and the escape procedures, right? So that's what we see on these three items here. When the deposit is given back to the buyer, no questions asked. So the first reason is interesting, and I have to unpack this. It says, in the result of a failed HUD sale. What is that? I don't know if you're familiar with who HUD is. I briefly described them on Monday. Can you remember? It's the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We know HUD's philosophy is that everybody should be a homeowner because homeowners stimulate the economy. They pay taxes, they're working class, and all of that. So HUD offers certain programs that make it easier for you to become a homeowner. I don't know if you're familiar with this, like the FHA home loan program. The qualifications to get a FHA loan are less than what you'll see for a conventional loan. More people qualify for FHA. The threshold is less. The barrier for entry is less, and the interest rates are less, and all kinds of stuff we'll talk about later on. Also, have you ever heard of down payment assistance? So it's first-time home buyer down payment assistance program. Every year, a certain amount of money is allocated for per state and per county that people can apply for and get down payment assistance towards the purchase of their primary residence. This money does not have to be paid back as long as you live in the property for the next 5 years. But some people manipulate, take advantage of this. They turn it into a rental after the first year. They don't comply with the terms of this program. They get caught, and now HUD wants their money back. And maybe you don't have the money. So what does HUD do? Just like a bank, they foreclose on the property. And HUD takes property from people that don't comply with their programs. You think the government wants a responsibility of maintaining this person's property? No. What do they do with it? They auction it off. They sell it. I've participated in every auction you can imagine, including HUD sales. It's called HUDhomestore.gov, if you're curious. HUDhomestore.gov. And you can go on this website, you can search in any state based on HUD-owned properties. You register as a bidder. Anybody can register as a bidder, but you have to give about $1,000 as a deposit if you want to bid on a particular property. If you're the highest bidder, what do they do with your deposit? They keep it, and they expect you to come up with the remaining balance. If you lose, if you're not the highest bidder, what do they give you back? No questions asked. Your deposit. So it's a long way of describing. I had to kind of give you some context, but if you're not the highest bidder in a HUD sale, then you get your money back, your deposit, no questions asked. The second reason is rescission periods. The buyer's intent to do what?
Yes.
Cancel the sale contract. And we'll talk about this in Unit 8, what those rescission periods are for various types of properties. Depending on the property, could give you a certain rescission period, certain amount of days to get out of the sale contract and get your deposit back. But if you're within that time period, yeah, you get your money back. And then the last we see here is based on the financing clause of the sale contract. You have a certain time period to secure financing. And if you're unable to secure financing, you made a good faith attempt to try to get the loan to buy the property. Well, the sale contract says this transaction is contingent on me getting a loan. Otherwise, I don't have the cash to buy it. I need a loan to get it. So I tried to get the loan. Here's evidence. I tried to get the loan, but the bank is not willing to give me financing. So I want to cancel the deal based on that. And you're allowed to within a certain time period. That's all negotiated. And it's under the financing section of a sale contract. If you use a standard sale contract, you'll see the financing section. So if the seller can prove that the buyer never even applied for financing, never even made an attempt, that's called good faith doubt. And then the seller might try to keep the deposit. But then you have to prove that. So anyhow, and there's other reasons why you can terminate the sale contract and get your deposit back, no penalty. What about the inspection period, right? You negotiate how long it's going to take you to do an inspection on the property. You pay a home inspector. And if you get the report back and you see something you don't like, it could be a deal breaker and you can back out, get your deposit. But it's within a certain time period. All of this is negotiated. There's also appraisal contingencies. For instance, and if you get an FHA loan, they require this. It's called a clause, a contingency addendum. All right. So essentially, it means that if the property does not appraise for the amount that you are willing to pay, then the seller, has to be willing to come down. And if they're not, then you can back out, get your deposit back. Yes.
So are you able to appeal if you have the deadline, if there's such thing?
You'd have to get an extension addendum signed by both parties. So imagine the inspection, maybe the market is crazy, right? And it's so hard to find a home inspector to come out within the next 7 days. So that way you can comply with that time period you negotiated. Maybe it was unforeseen. You didn't think it was going to be so difficult. Maybe you go to the seller and say, hey, listen, can you give me a few more days to do the inspection? And that would be an extension of that time period for you to review and potentially back out. So maybe the seller's like, no, I'm not going to give you more time. You agreed to 7 days. That's all you got. Everything's negotiable, right? So that's what you have to understand getting into this business. All the terms and conditions and clauses and provisions are all negotiated. Let's move on. Is it possible for you to charge upfront before you complete the real estate service? Are you allowed to charge upfront before you complete the real estate service for somebody? It is possible, but it's not common. Sometimes you come across, or somebody might reach out to you, they're a for sale by owner, and they're just not getting the exposure that they think they should be getting for their property by putting a sign in their front yard and posting it on their Facebook account. But they want to post it on Zillow, Trulia, Realtor.com. Well, that's, the access that you have to the MLS. It blasts it on the internet. So they say, hey, listen, I'll give you a flat fee up front to list my unit and get me more exposure. List my home. And all the leads go to me. So maybe you charge them a flat $300 up front to put it in the MLS. That's possible. That happens. Anyhow. Any questions about this besides the explanation? The only exception to it is possible. Look what it says. It's possible for you to do that. But the Florida Vacation and Time Sharing Act prohibits charging somebody an upfront fee for listing their timeshare unit. Have you heard of timeshare resale companies? Timeshare resale companies, that's the thing. Anybody actually own timeshare in here? No, besides me? Okay. At the bottom, sales associate. Well, we see broker's commission, but sales associate's commission beneath that. This is something that we described, but let's confirm once again. Let's review. As a sales associate or even broker associates, you must operate under the supervision of a what? Of a broker. Can you operate independently? No, that's confirmed for us once again. Look at the first two sentences. Can associates open up their own office? No. Any business you bring to the company is whose business? That's the next sentence. The amount of commission to be paid is always what? That's the next sentence. And the last sentence in this paragraph, is there any limit to what you charge for your services? Florida does not limit. Interesting. The sales associate's commission is determined by the agreement they have with their employer. Can you receive commission compensation directly from the buyer or the seller within a real estate transaction? No. Everything must go through your what? Through your broker. You got it. Is the broker entitled to taking their split? Whatever is negotiated in your employment contract. Yeah. Every brokerage company has their own splits. What's your split? What's my split? And it might change over time based on your performance as well. Ask these questions when you're talking to Ryan. Ask them, what's your split? Okay. Is it based on performance? Can I get a bigger split later on? So that way you have baseline and you know what to expect, what brokers typically charge new agents, savvy agents based on performance and so forth. Anyhow, how many brokers are typically working the deal? It's typically two. You got the seller side and you got the buyer side, right? Could one brokerage represent both sides? Do the deal. Yeah, transaction broker. We talked about that depending on the relationship. Obviously, transaction broker is acceptable. But the rules have changed with commission. Ask Ryan about that as well. Because now you can't, it's never been like this, but you can't obligate the seller to pay for both sides. That was what sellers and this whole lawsuit was about. The seller didn't feel like they should pay for the other side, their commission, when they're negotiating against them. Right? This party is working against me and I got to pay them commission. So they said, no, we only want to be obligated to pay our agent that's representing us and not the other side. So now buyers have to have an agreement with a buyer's agent. They have to have a signed agreement that outlines how much commission they're willing to pay their agent. And don't assume you're going to get it from the seller. Yeah. Anyhow. Any questions here? If all business that you bring to the brokerage company is the brokerage company's property, you'll see that right here, property of the broker. That means any money made off of that business is whose money? Yeah, on the next page, page 109, all monies earned by associates are to be paid to them by the broker, not directly by the buyer or seller. It says sometimes a buyer or seller might try to give you a thank you, like an additional bonus, a gift basket, Bad Bunny tickets, okay? Beyonce tickets, Taylor Swift tickets, whatever the case may be. They might try to give you a bonus because you're a rock star. And man, I couldn't have got this property for this price without you. I can't believe you negotiated that price for me. So I would feel bad if I didn't give you something. Take this money, take this gift card, take whatever. Can you accept that money? Yes, take that money. But you have to direct them to not pay you directly. You have to, exactly. Any money that's earned off of these transactions has to be paid to you by your brokerage and not directly by the seller or the buyer. Any questions on that? Yes. So money's easy to split, right? Taylor Swift tickets are not easy to split, but it's at the broker's discretion. If it's something like that, most brokers are gonna be like, yeah, keep it. Like, what am I gonna do with that? What am I gonna sit next to you during the concert? Like, that's my split to go with you to the concert. It didn't make any sense. But you see all kinds of different bonuses that might be proposed. For instance, there was a property that I found a buyer for, and the bonus that was detailed in the MLS, the public didn't see it. If it was listed on Zillow, you couldn't see this additional bonus. But because I have access to the MLS, it said, if you find a buyer that's willing to pay this price by this time, it was a vacation home, you essentially get the bonus of the Mercedes that was sitting in the garage, which was a $60,000 Mercedes. I was able to find a buyer for that vacation home. It turns out the story behind it was a Canadian seller, and he was liquidating all of his property in Florida, didn't want to deal with it, the maintenance or whatever. And he bought a Mercedes to use while he was on vacation because he came with his family every single year and he had no use for it. So he's like, listen, give it as a bonus. I don't care. Just sell the house for this amount by this date. And that's an incentive to really find a buyer for it because I just want to get rid of it. And I got the vehicle. Now, here's the thing. I was a broker at the time, so I didn't have to split with anybody, which was nice. and I ended up selling the Mercedes. But if I was a sales associate, if and the exam is testing me on this, that's a bonus. And my broker is essentially entitled to their split. Now, a vehicle is very difficult to split. Like, what is the broker going to say? Well, my split is the weekends. I get to drive on the weekends, and then you have it Monday through Friday, right? But money is easy to split. If the broker wants, it's at their discretion if they want to take what they're entitled to. So just be aware of that, especially when you're tested on it. I live by a rule of thumb. If you can eat the evidence, it should be okay for you to keep it. Like if they give you a gift basket of like, different goods and stuff like that, what are you going to do? Bring that to your broker, the gift basket, and say, well, take your split. And the broker's like, well, I want the apple, the muffin, the Godiva chocolates. It's like, come on. Doesn't make any sense. Sharing commission with a party to the transaction, you're allowed to do this. You're allowed to share your commission with the buyer or the seller to the transaction. It's acceptable. So if you're working with one of your friends, you're helping them purchase their first house, and you want to give them a piece of your commission to pay for moving expenses, whatever, because you're a great friend, you can do that. But all parties have to know. All parties have to be fully informed. I think you'll see that here. Yeah, full disclosure to all parties, all interested parties. So it's not hidden, it's known to all parties involved that, hey, listen, I'm going to give a piece of my commission to the buyer. But it's acceptable. Even though they're not licensed, because you're thinking, oh, they're unlicensed, how can they receive money off of a real estate transaction? It's because it's the buyer or the seller. They're a party to the transaction already. You're not giving a bonus to your cousin that's bringing you business. Okay, that's unacceptable. And you'll have family members and friends like this. Oh, congratulations on getting your real estate license. I told so-and-so that you just got your license. They're happy for you and all that great. But it turns out they actually needed to sell their property. And I told them about you, and they want to list their house with you. And you're all excited. Oh, wow, thank you so much for the referral. Thank you for keeping me in mind. That's awesome. And then they pull you to the side and say, well, give me whatever you think is fair. You're going to make some money off of it, right? Yeah, just give me whatever you think is fair for a referral. Can you give them anything? Absolutely not. Because that's money off of a real estate transaction. And why would you even be in class if that was acceptable? How could you receive money off of a real estate transaction without a real estate what? License. Otherwise, you wouldn't be taking this class. You'd be thinking, I have a friend that has a license. I'll just give business to them, let them do the work, and I'll receive that referral money. You can't do that. You need a license to receive anything on the transaction. Okay? I get the question all the time. Okay, Michael, what if I take them out to a fancy seafood dinner, right? I take them over to Seasons 52, Eddie V's, or whatever the case may be. Is that dinner that you're sponsoring based on the referral they gave you, the real estate transaction? So you're giving them compensation in a different form off of them bringing you business, real estate business. Unacceptable. You can't do it. If you get caught with this, don't ask me how you can get caught. You know it's illegal now. You can't do it. Bottom line, any questions about this? All right. And just a couple minutes before we take our next break. Antitrust laws. 2 in particular. One that we're going to be testing on. Question number 1. We made it. Price fixing. It's where competing brokers conspire to establish a standard commission rate or compensation for business that's brought to them within the industry. Do you understand what this is describing? Is basically local brokers saying, hey, listen, we need to make an agreement because we got to push up how much money we're making off of a real estate transaction. It's like a race to the bottom. We don't want to race to the bottom. We want to increase the commissions that we can earn. So we get most of the business in this area anyway. Have an agreement. Make sure all of your agents, if they're going to list property, make sure you list it for at least 6%, whatever the case may be. So they're conspiring, they're colluding with one another to fix prices. Why is this unacceptable? Because the amount of commission to be paid off of a real estate transaction, everything is what? Negotiable between all parties involved. You can't do this. And there's not one brokerage company that owns a town, a subdivision, a zip code. It's an open and competitive market. That's the whole point of these. It should be an open and competitive market, not closed, not conspiring, not colluding. Does that make sense? So imagine an example of a violation of market allocation. There's not one market that's allocated to a specific brokerage company. You can't go door knocking to each homeowner in a subdivision and tell them, hey, listen, if you're going to list your property in this market, in this subdivision, you have to list with me. That's illegal. That's a violation of these antitrust laws. Are you with me on that? If you somehow don't get paid the commission that you earned off of a real estate transaction, can you legally fight for it? Yes, and this is how you do it. Besides taking legal action, you could put a lien against their property. Do you know what a lien is? Okay, well, you definitely know about this because of permitting coordination, right? So a lien, if you're not familiar, liens are claims. NK Solutions. Send a voicemail. All right. Are claims for a debt. It's a claim for a debt. That's what it is. That's what liens are. Still on that screen, isn't it? The voicemail. And you get to see what they're saying. MK Windows, I got your email. Okay. Get out of here. Okay. Make it difficult. Is it following me? Great. Okay. So follow along with me real quick. I'll be brief. We're almost done with this unit. Do you want to knock out the remainder of this unit? Are you opposed to that? Okay. For residential property, a broker has to be expressly authorized to do so in the agreement. It's not automatic that if you somehow don't get paid the commission that you're entitled to, that you can put a lien against their property for residential. Okay? That's for residential. For commercial property, if you sell or lease, if you make compensation off of selling or leasing commercial property, it's automatic that you could put a lien against the property for the commission, the compensation that's owed. And when you put a lien against somebody's property, a claim for a debt, you can enforce that claim by foreclosing on their property. Okay? Just like when you get a loan from a bank, until you pay off the debt, they put a mortgage lien. And if you don't pay, they enforce that claim, the mortgage lien. We'll talk more about that in a later unit, but I'm just giving you some foreshadowing. Go to page 111. Kickbacks, referral fees, unearned fees, rebates, whatever you want to call them. What's an unearned fee? Well, that's a referral fee, guys. That means you didn't do the work, but you made money off of the transaction. These are acceptable in our business. You can refer to another real estate agent in Miami because that's not your farm area. You're not familiar with that area, or maybe you don't have access to the MLS in Miami to list it in their database. So you coordinate with the top agent out there and you say, hey, listen, I have a seller. They want to move to Orlando. I'm helping them purchase a property in Orlando, but they told me they need to sell their house in Miami first. So this is a listing I want to bring to you and your brokerage company, but it's my lead. So I want to receive 50% of the commission that you charge. Is this acceptable in our business? Yeah. And you got to be silly not to accept it on the other end, because I just put free money in your pocket. And if they say, no, we'll give you 20%. Say, listen, I'll do it for 50. No, we can't do it. Okay. I'll call up the next person and they'll do it for 50, because listing opportunities are not that abundant. I mean, they are, but it's what you want. You want to be a listing agent. Yes.
You didn't have access to like the Miami MLS.
Yes.
Is it not statewide?
No, it's unfortunate, but that's going to change. Who knows when it's going to change? I can't predict that. I don't want to speculate. However, it is. Like, for instance, I'll give you an example. I'm flipping a property in Cocoa. Cocoa is Brevard County. My membership is with NAR, National Association of Realtors, FAR, Florida Association of Realtors, and ORA. ORA is Orlando Regional Realtors Association. If you join with a brokerage company, you join whatever association they're a part of. Okay? So they might be of ORA, which is Orlando. They might be a part of Osceola County Association of Realtors. And they might give you access to certain MLSs, but it might exclude certain counties. Certain counties might have their own MLS, and you have to join that local membership to get access to their MLS. Brevard is one of those. It's called Space Coast. It's called SCAR, SCAR, Space Coast Association of Realtors. And I have to pay to list the property I'm flipping in Brevard County. Miami has their own. Yeah, let's continue on. But if you join ORA, you have access to most properties in Florida, but there are certain counties that just have their own. That is silly and it should change, but let's continue on. All parties to the transaction have to be informed of the referral fee, kickback, whatever it is. Kickbacks cannot violate the law. There is a federal law called RESPA. This is on line 12. Real estate, the key word is Settlement Procedures Act. This is something we're going to describe in Unit 13, but if I can share something about it with you right now. RESPA is a federal law that governs the money exchanged upon closing of a real estate transaction. It governs the money that's exchanged upon closing of a real estate transaction, including this type of money, referral fees. So this federal law says certain referral fees are acceptable and certain ones are not. Like if you refer business to a title company, attorneys, surveyors, people that are pulling credit reports, appraisals, home inspectors, they cannot give you a kickback for bringing them the business. RESPA prohibits this. There is an exception. I mentioned if you get what license? The mortgage license, which you absolutely should. It's only a 22-hour class. And you want to maximize on every single real estate transaction you do, especially we're talking about 90% of buyers need financing, then get that license so you can legally double dip. And if you want to triple dip, get the insurance license, property and casualty. It's unlawful to share commission with an unlicensed person other than the seller or the buyer. We already know that. We discussed it. And it's unlawful to pay an unlicensed person for performing real estate services, except what we talked about on the first day of class. You remember on the first day of class, we talked about if you live in an apartment building or a complex and you refer a friend, they can give you no more than how much cash? That's an exception. Even though you don't have a real estate license, no, it's cash. Gift card, same thing. But if they try to give you more, they're not going to give you cash. They're going to give you credit towards maybe next month's rent. Exactly. Say this, oh, we're not giving cash, we're giving credit. Anyhow, a reduction, a discount. That's not the same thing as cash. Anyhow, 2 class exam questions on the same information. Same information. Okay. Mark it and let's continue. Last thing for this unit. Last thing. And then we'll take a break. Is that okay? When you decide to become a broker, most likely you're not going to run your brokerage business under your personal name, because if the business gets sued, liability purposes, that means you're personally sued and they can attack all your personal assets. That's why most businesses operate under a business entity, like a what? LLC, corporation. We'll see the types of business entities that the beeper says, yes, you can operate your brokerage entity or business under. And the beeper says, these are the ones that you cannot. So we're going to talk about that. We're talking about the ones that are acceptable, the ones that are not acceptable to operate your brokerage business under. And some of the reasons why. So if we can go through this list. Sole proprietorship. What does sole mean? Yeah, solo, right? So sole means one. It's a form of business owned and operated by how many individuals? Yeah, and these are acceptable. We're talking about the ones that are acceptable first, okay? By the way, any business entity that's acceptable and you want to operate your business under has to be registered with the Florida Department of State. Did you know this? Does anybody have an LLC or a business entity that they operate under? For what services? For accounting? Okay. Not that you want to promote or, okay. Yes. Yeah. Smart, makes sense for tax purposes and liability, right? Yes. For beauty, okay. Anything specific or? Okay. Awesome. What's the name of your business? Okay. All right. All right, because my wife does that type of stuff, so I'm trying to make a connection. I could have sworn that the business owner had the same name as you for another one, but it's not the same. So let's go to page 113. Partnerships are acceptable, where two or more persons are doing business with one another, right? But there's two types of partnerships that we have to have a clear distinction of. General partners are equally responsible for each other and take on equal liability for each other's actions. That's scary. That's a general partner. But in our business, we also have limited partners. What are limited partners? Well, they're limited to the investment that they make within the company. They're silent partners. They make a cash or property investment of property or cash. And that's the most they can lose. Okay. On the next page, if you want to set up a business where all of the partners are limited partners, you would set up a limited liability partnership where all the partners don't take on equal liability and responsibility for each other's actions. Excuse me. What about a corporation? Corporation, it says a legal entity created by law consisting of one or more persons. Corporation is an artificial person considered to have an existence of its own, separate from the corporation's officers, directors, president, vice president, secretary, treasurer. Setting up a corporation my advice to you would be to get some professional help if you want to set up a corporation, because you don't want to make a mistake. And some people think, oh, just watch a YouTube video, but setting up a corporation is a little bit more complex. And you got to do it in the right way. What type of corporation is it? S Corp is a C Corp. In addition to that, are you going to issue stock? Because you have to issue stock. Okay, how much stock are you issuing? How much is that each share worth? And then you have to pay taxes on the total stock and so forth. You have to understand that. Who's the officers? Who's the directors? Who's the president, vice president, secretary, treasurer? You have to host meetings for your corporation. So many things. And you don't want to make a mistake. So there's services out there or people that can help you with setting up a corporation. It's not for free, but you're probably better off. Anyhow. And you might want to operate under a corporation because if the company gets sued, the most you lose is the corporation and all the assets of the corporation. You can't be sued personally. LLC. LLC is a lot more favorable to most people because it's just so much easier to set up. It's less time consuming, quick approval. All of this gets set up with the Florida Department of State. Sunbiz.org, if you've heard of this website. Anybody hear of this website? Yeah. You can even go on there to verify if a business is operating legitimately and they're active and so forth. Anyhow, LLC That one, you could probably watch a YouTube video and figure out how to set it up. It's so quick. I can set up an LLC in 15 minutes. And that probably in the same 15 minutes, I can request a free EIN number from IRS. You know what EIN is? Employer Identification Number. It's how they track you for tax purposes. Anyhow, but I do also have a corporation because I have multiple LLCs, and then I put it under the parent company. It makes it easier to file tax returns. File one corporate tax return rather than these individual LLCs under my Schedule C on my personal taxes. Anyhow, those of you who are in finance, you know this stuff already. But anyhow, vacancy of office. If the only active broker of the corporation dies, resigns, or is unable to continue with that position, their vacancy has to be filled within how many calendar days? Yes. Otherwise, it's automatic. On line 32, automatic what? Cancellation. If the brokerage company needs more time, you can hire a temporary broker to hold that position for up to how long? 60 days. You'll see that on line 37. Continues on line 38. And once again, if it exceeds 60 days and you can't find a broker to hold that position permanently, automatic cancellation of that brokerage company's registration with the beeper. Because remember, brokerage companies have to register with the beeper, right? They have to be issued a license to operate under that business entity, right? Okay, now the ones that can't. Ostensible partnership is where two or more people give the appearance that a partnership exists, but it doesn't. Those are unacceptable in our business. Can't do it. Look what it says. Real estate licensees who operate under an ostensible partnership may be subject to license suspension. Corporation sole. Let me simplify what a corporation sole is. It's a legitimate religious organization, ecclesiastical. Ecclesiastical means all denominations of religion, okay, or all various types. You can't open up a brokerage business under your religious organization entity, okay? You can't do that. What, you're going to collect money from followers to open up a brokerage office? Does that make sense? No, can't do that. Unacceptable, prohibited. And to be honest with you, I think this has nothing to do with my faith, but I do think religious facilities need to pay property tax. And we'll talk more about this later on. Huh? Property tax? No. That's why the Kardashians set up a religion. So the property they own could be put under the religion and then they're exempt from paying property taxes. We'll talk about that later on. Joint venture is a temporary form of business by two or more individuals to handle one transaction or a certain amount of transactions. After that, nothing exists between these parties. Oh, you'll see right here. Single transaction or a fixed number of transactions. Because it's temporary, that's why it's unacceptable. You can't open up a brokerage office under something that's temporary. Business trust says a form of business entity that may be created to engage in transactions involving what type of property? Its own. And because we know that for sale by owner exists, that exception to the rule, you don't need to be licensed when you're involved in your own property. These are unacceptable entities. Let's continue on. Unincorporated association. The best example I can give you of this, generally recognized as groups of people associated for some uncommercial common purpose, like an HOA, guys. What's the purpose of an HOA? Homeowners Association. Yeah, I mean, you hear stories about it all the time. And then actually, that's one of the reasons why I refuse to live in a community that is governed by an HOA, because I want to do what I want with my property. And I don't want to have to answer to anybody. But anyhow, besides the point, I'll get into venting about it. But HOA, the money they collect from homeowners should be used for the beautification of the community. Maintenance should not be used to open up a brokerage office. That's what the subject is. What's a trade name for a business? We saw it in the very beginning of this unit. It's a what? Fictitious name. It's whatever name you want to operate under for your business. Also, they might describe it as a DBA. Have you heard of that before? Doing business as. So for instance, it might be Cameron Realty LLC doing business as Cameron Realty. Because I don't want to put LLC on my business cards and my signs and all of that stuff. But it could be something completely different. It could be Business Enterprises LLC doing business as whatever luminous, elegant lashes or whatever it might be. You know what I'm saying? So it could be something completely different that you want to operate your business name under. So, but it's registered with the Florida Department of State. So they keep track of, what entity owns what. And last thing. If you hire an unlicensed personal assistant, that's a good problem, right? Because maybe you have so many leads you need help. Somebody to answer phone calls. Is this acceptable in our business? Can you pay them a salary? The answer is yes and yes. So you can hire a personal assistant and you can pay them a salary. Can you pay them a piece of your commission? No, because I mentioned they're an unlicensed personal assistant. Unless they have the license, then they would make their license active with the same broker you're with, and then you can give them a little piece of your commission. Can they perform real estate services if they're unlicensed? Okay, so let's unpack that and let me give you some examples. You tell me what you think. Can they answer phone calls for you? Yeah. Can they take messages for you? Can they respond to emails for you? Can they put signs up for you? Yeah. Can they host open houses for you? No, they cannot. They cannot. Unacceptable. So anything associated with a real estate service where it could lead to negotiation, for instance, they can't be a part of that. Can they transfer? Can they run money? Can they collect deposit money? Can they bring deposit money to the bank to be put in the escrow account? Listen, if you were to ask my opinion on this, I would say hell to the no. Okay. Why would I want them to touch money if they don't have a real estate license? I do. Who's more liable? I'm bound by these laws and have to comply with time periods when handling deposit money. They're unlicensed. They don't have to comply with the same set of rules. But it is acceptable for them to do this. They can handle money in a real estate transaction, which is foolish that exists. But do you remember from the very beginning, we said, if the broker's not in the office, you can turn it over to an unlicensed receptionist. So it is possible, but I don't like it personally. Any questions about this? This outlines what we talked about. Oh, this is not the personal assistant. Personal assistant is on the next page. Let me talk about what this is. You're not going to be a broker. And you learn all these rules about what the broker has to comply with, regulation for the broker. If they don't comply with it, you're like, that's kind of silly because I'm not going to become a broker. I'm going to become a sales associate. But there are procedures that you have to comply with. And of course, you're going to be tested on it. You have to be able to know how to navigate within a brokerage company and bring value to the company. Understanding these rules brings that value to the table. Besides that, when you get your license as a sales associate, you're thinking, okay, what if I start earning commissions and I'm doing these, I'm providing real estate services for compensation? What if I get sued? How do I protect myself? When I get paid my commission, I have to get paid personally? Why can't I be paid under a business entity? Because you have this LLC you set up for your businesses. Can I just be paid my commission through that? No, not under existing entities you've created for other businesses. You have to make an entirely new LLC for real estate services. And the LLC has to be your legal name, and you have to use your social security number to set it up. Not an EIN, your social. So if it was myself, if I can give you an example and I was in your shoes, it would be Michael Cameron, LLC. That would be my name, and I would use my social to set it up. Why? Because this designation could be added to my license. And remember, my license can only be issued in my legal name, my personal legal name. But why you would do this and why I would advise all of you to do this is because protection against liability. If you make a mistake in a real estate transaction, maybe you have insurance, but at least the LLC is a separate entity from you personally. And then also, if you get paid through the LLC, it's like you're getting paid under a business. And then it unlocks all of the wonderful deductions that you want to claim as a business owner. Like what? What deductions can you claim? What are you spending money on as a real estate professional? Yeah, mileage you put on your car. What about maintenance for your car? Yeah, mileage. Yeah. What about wrapping your car? You're using your car for advertises, mobile billboard. What about business cards? What about business attire? What about your cell phone bill because you're doing deals on it? What about your laptop because you're writing contracts on it? What about the space? Yeah. What about the space you set aside in your house that is your little office? That is tax deductible as well. Supplies, all this, for sale signs. It unlocks all of these wonderful deductions if you operate under the LLC. It's much more limited if you're just operating under your personal name. Yes.
If you, in case you get sued, like, I mean, hopefully it doesn't happen to anyone, but in the case that you get sued, like, they can go after everything as far as your home, your car, everything.
That's owned by the LLC.
Well, so they're.
No, it's an LLC. It's just set up using your social, but it's a business entity. It's a limited liability company is what you're setting up. So it's a separate entity from you personally. So if that gets sued, well, I operate my business, my real estate profession under this LLC. But in addition to that, you should also consider getting E&O insurance. E&O insurance, errors and omissions insurance. It's only like $500 for the whole year. And it protects you against mistakes you might make. Imagine you wrote up the contract, but you made a mistake and it caused somebody to lose money, and then they sue you. E&O insurance will pay off that issue. And then on page 119, this is the class, what we discuss about personal assistance. You're going to be tested on it. Class exam question. Second longest unit in the textbook. Second longest, but the most important, 12%. Let's take a break. Be back at 7:50. 7:50. Stretch out, do what you got to do. Be ready to rock and roll. See you guys in just a moment. 10 minutes. William, Barbara, thank you. Appreciate it. Cameras on. Telling you guys to put your cameras on. I got my camera on. All right, let's jump into Unit 6. Close that out. Okay, Unit 6, once again, is all about complaints, violations, and penalties. We're going to start on page 128 with legal terms to know. You can highlight these, read through them later on tonight. Also, if I mentioned to you, I made flashcards for terminology, but I'll just briefly touch on each one. Breach is the breaking of a promise. Oops. What's going on here? There we go. Yeah. So key to every contract is a promise to do or to not do certain things. If you break that promise, it's called breach. We'll see that in the later unit. Concealment, the withholding of information. Like I said, just highlight these for now. You could find a glossary in the back of your book, or you could use a flashcards if you got the exam prep. Culpable negligence is guilty of being careless. We saw that in the previous unit. Fraud is straight out lying on the next page. Material fact is relevant information, like material defects in the property. Misrepresentation means you didn't necessarily lie, you twisted the truth, or you concealed something, you left something out to make it completely truthful. And moral turpitude is unethical conduct. That's essentially what it means. You'll see right here. Conduct contrary to honesty, good morals, accepted custom. Let's continue on. Go to page 130, and in the shaded box, we see something called the complaint process. We're going to go through this complaint process. How many steps do we see here? There's 7. Let's go through each one of these 7 steps. Now, what are we talking about the complaint process? We're talking about when somebody feels a real estate professional did something unethical, something illegal within a real estate transaction, and they might want to file a complaint against them for those actions. How is that complaint handled? Let's go through the process. Step number 1, and this goes for you as well. If you see a fellow real estate professional that is operating illegally, unethically, obviously you're going to submit a complaint against them, and it's the purpose that it serves is you eliminate some competition. But filing the complaint is the first step. Who are complaints filed with? On line 3. The beeper's what? Division of Real Estate. Now, the beeper and Division of Real Estate, they're not going to waste their time. They will only investigate complaints that are legally sufficient. So you need to know what it takes to make a complaint legally sufficient. And that's what you see on these bullet points. Go ahead and highlight. Violates a Florida statute, but a beeper rule or a FREC rule. If it is legally sufficient, they are then going to investigate, read out the complaint, read through the details, and establish if there's probable cause. So step number 2 is to investigate. But if they believe that what you did upon investigation is going to endanger the public further, they're going to shut you down immediately until they can complete this investigation process and establish whether or not there's probable cause. It's called a summary or emergency suspension what? Order. To prevent you from practicing until they can get down to the bottom of it. Now, as I mentioned, part of this investigation is to establish probable cause. That's the next step. Probable cause determination is determined by a majority vote of the FREC's probable cause panel, line 6. But you might even be wondering, what is probable cause? You'll see it on line 5. It's reasonable grounds for prosecution. Is there grounds to prosecute you based on what you did in the complaint? And FREC determines that. Let's move on. Go to the next page. And if probable cause is established, excuse me, I'm getting tongue-tied right now. Maybe I need some more water. If probable cause is established by FREC, then it's going to move on to the next complaint, which is the formal complaint is submitted or sent out to the licensee, to the address on file for that licensee. This is why you have to keep your information current. We talked about that. And if you change your address, you have to notify, just in case a complaint is filed against you. Have to be able to respond within a certain time period. There's 3 sides to every story, right? Your side, my side, and the what? Yeah, but how do they get the truth if they're only getting one side, the person that filed the complaint against that licensee? So they want to see what the licensee has to say for themselves. Explain your side of the story. That's what the formal complaint gives them the authority to do under the election of rights. This is how you respond, through the election of rights. And you have to respond within 3 weeks, 21 days. You can either not dispute the allegations, request an informal hearing. We'll come back to this. So not dispute. You can dispute the allegations, request a formal hearing, or not dispute and waive your right to be heard. If it goes past 21 days and you don't respond, then they're still going to have a hearing. It's going to be an informal hearing, but you can't defend yourself. It's basically them deciding how to discipline you. They say everything in real estate is negotiable, and apparently so are complaints. Because if you look on page 134, a stipulation could be reached between you and your legal representation and the legal representatives of the division of real estate. What is a stipulation? It's a settlement. Settlement, stipulation. It's an agreement. One way to resolve or to reach a stipulation is to give you this option. Hey, listen, based on what you did, you can continue fighting it. But if you do, then we think there's probably enough here to revoke your license. And then that disciplinary blemish will be on your record forever. We'll give you the opportunity right now to voluntarily give up your license and walk away from the real estate business permanently. That's what we see in front of us. That could be an option. Voluntarily relinquish. So you're voluntarily giving up your license. Okay. The informal hearing. What's the difference between informal and formal? Very simple. How often does FREC meet? Once a month. Where do they meet? Downtown Orlando. You'll see it right here. Normally held at a regular commission meeting. We know where that takes place. And once again, this is when you do not dispute, does not dispute the allegations, but you still want to be heard and explain your side of the story. Yes, what they're saying is true, but there's more to it than that. Let me explain, because I think you would reconsider if I give you my explanation, and that's how it's handled. Waiver hearing is, once again, when you do not respond within 21 days. It will continue as a informal hearing. Informal is when you dispute the allegations against you. You just absolutely disagree, and now more parties have to be involved. It's an official hearing. If you go to page 135, you'll see it. It talks about the administrative law judge. On line 5, the administrative law judge is appointed by DeBeeper. I want you to write that down somewhere. It's the DeBeeper's administrative law judge. They assign them. And they are present during the formal hearing. They have the power to swear witnesses, get witnessed testimony from other parties involved. That means subpoena people, require people to come to the hearing to speak to the matter. And then after that, the DeBeeper's administrative law judge prepares a recommended order based on findings and conclusions in the complaint hearing. But it's just a recommendation. It's what they think should happen to you based on the details of the case. Who issues the final order against a licensee? Yes, you'll see under final order, Line 17, who issues a final order? FREC. Remember, it's at FREC's discretion. They issue final orders against licensees. Final decision on the matter. That could result in penalty. It could result in dismissing. Could result in you just paying some type of penalty or fine, suspension of your license. We'll see that in a moment. What if you disagree with the final order? Do you have a right to dispute it? The answer is yes. And that's called an appeal. You have within how many days? 30 days to appeal. Any questions about this? Meanwhile, while you're waiting for the appeal to be solidified, you might not be able to practice real estate. Maybe the final order was to suspend your license, put your license on probation for 6 months, but you have pending deals. This is how you put food on the table. It was a misunderstanding. No, I want to appeal this. You need to hear me once again. And I have some evidence, overwhelming evidence that I'm in the right. But meanwhile, I need to close on these deals. I need to provide for my family. So you'd have to request that. It's called a stay of enforcement request. And if they agree with it, they have to issue a writ of supersedeas to allow you to continue practicing while waiting for the appeal, while we are waiting for them to reconsider. Writ of supersedeas. Writ is Latin for right. Of supersedeas. Supersedeas means to override, to supersede. So it's the right to override, to allow you to continue practicing even though maybe the final order says otherwise. Okay. With that aside, let's move on. And this unit doesn't take me very much time to cover. On the next page, you see administrative what? Penalties. Let me read this out to you. It's important for you to hear. It's on line 2. There are 3 types of penalties that could be imposed against a real estate licensee for violations of real estate license law. Administrative, civil, and what? But if the question on your exam says, what can FREC do to you? Specifically FREC, we know FREC is limited to only what matters? License matters, which is administrative penalties only. Do you see that here? Administrative matters does not extend to criminal action. And as we learn, and as you were tested on, look on line 8 once again. Can FREC put you in jail? Can FREC put you in jail? No, may not impose disciplinary penalty as far as imprisonment is concerned. Can FREC force you to pay somebody in a lawsuit? No, FREC does not have the authority to order restitution to an injured party. Any questions about this? Okay. So let's talk about more of what FREC can do. Go to the next page, page 138. Highlight this for a class exam question. Page 138. Notice of non-compliance. Highlight that. 27 through 31. Notice of non-compliance. Lock that in. Okay. I'm going to come back to that. So check this out. If you go to the next page, you'll see a chart, figure 6.1. Let's focus on this chart. If the question on your exam says, what can DBEPR or DRE do? DRE operates within DBEPR. Remember, DRE is a division within the DBEPR. They're governed by DBEPR. What can they do to you? Well, they can issue you a notice of non-compliance. So what is that? It's a first response to a minor violation. So if it's a very small issue, you can easily fix it, and it was your first offense, it's basically a warning that you're not complying with the rules. You're receiving a notice that you're not in compliance, hence the name. And you have within how many days to take care of it? You have within 15 calendar days to resolve it. They give you an example. I like that on this chart. You can read through it later on tonight. If you don't take care of it within 15 days, it will automatically turn into a what? Look, I'm highlighting it. Next down, citation. No substantial threat to the public. However, you got to take care of this. And you have within how many days to take care of it? 30 calendar days. And on top of that, could result in a fine that could range from how much? $250 to $1,000. Any questions about that? All right, so if we go to the next page, page 140, what can FREC do to you? Not to be Dre, what can FREC do to you? Well, it's very simple. We discussed this already. Can FREC deny you from getting a license? Can they put your license on probation? Can they fine you? Yes, up to how much? $5,000. Can they suspend your license? Up to how long? Up to 10 years. And can they revoke your license? Is that permanent? Yes. Revocation is permanent and it's due to disciplinary action. It's the most severe penalty FREC can impose. You can no longer practice real estate. Let's move on. Go to the next page. One item that I didn't mention to you is right here. When would they revoke your license but not hold penalty against you, not hold prejudice against you? There's only one example where this can occur. It's if you were issued a license by mistake. For instance, if you pass a state exam to get your sales associate license, but instead of sales associate, it says real estate broker. It's your name, but it says real estate broker. What are you supposed to do? Open up your own brokerage office, start hiring sales associates. If they catch you doing something like this, is that illegal? It's not illegal because the law says you need a broker's license to open up your own brokerage office. Well, that's my name. It says real estate broker. Is it illegal? No. Is it unethical? And if they catch you, what are they going to do with that license? Revoke it, but not hold prejudice penalty against you because it was their what? Their fault, their mistake. And they should have known what type of person you were. Right? Question. Yes.
So you go back and get it?
Well, if you did the right thing in the beginning, they're just going to reissue the correct license. But if you try to open up your own brokerage office and all this stuff, they're not going to penalize you, but they're going to say, you got to start all over again. Go to page 142, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Actually, no, page 143. Let's talk about criminal penalties. And let's go through each one. The second degree what? On line 5. There's only one example that you could possibly be tested on for exam purposes. And that's when you advertise property in a fraudulent, false, deceptive, or misleading manner. What do we call that? False what? False advertising, right? And as we learn in Unit 5 already, it results in what? A second degree what? Misdemeanor. We saw that in a previous unit. We see it again, but now you see the penalty that follows this violation. Up to how much of a fine? Yes. And or up to how much time imprisonment? 60 days. Okay. What about a first degree misdemeanor? Highest level of misdemeanor. And you're probably thinking, well, wait a second. Shouldn't second be higher than first? No, that's not how they count it when it comes to law. First is the highest. For instance, think of like the felonies. What's the most heinous crime? Murder. And that's why they call it murder in the first degree, because it's the highest level of felony. So number 1 is highest. So even above that, which is really odd, is what we have in front of us. There's only one example that you're going to be tested on. It's when you fail to provide accurate and current rental information for a fee. Really? This could result in a highest level of misdemeanor, selling inaccurate rental information. First of all, people rely on this heavily to make financial decisions. And you can print out a list for somebody because you have access to the MLS and they give you their criteria. I want a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, this area, no more, at least this amount of square feet, whatever the case may be. And then you have results based on what's available in the area. You can sell it. It's just didn't make sense to sell it. It's not practical to sell it. You should give it away for free Because if you sell it, you take on liability. You feel me? Because you don't want a first degree. and the way to help you remember this is think of 111. First degree misdemeanor, how much of a fine? How much of a fine? $1,000 fine and or up to how much time imprisonment? 1 year imprisonment. 111. That will help you remember. And there's only one example. Selling inaccurate rental information. But once again, if you give it away for free, there's no liability. You feel me? Because you don't want a first degree. I'm not a rapper, okay? Definitely not. Let's not do that to ourselves right now. Third degree felony. Third degree felony, there's 3 examples of this, but let's talk about the penalty that follows. Up to how much of a fine? And or up to how much time in jail? 5 years. For what? Well, let's go through each one. Lying on your application to get a license. That's one example. Unlicensed practice of real estate. I mentioned this to you. If you're trying to practice real estate without a license, that's a third degree felony. Same thing if you're trying to practice law without a law license, third degree felony. If you steal a copy of the state exam, or you somehow come across an unauthorized copy of the state exam, and you get caught with that paperwork, it could result in a third degree felony. Nobody should have a copy of the state exam except for who? DeBeeper, and who do they contract with? Pearson View, yes, who administer the state exam. Nobody should have a copy of it unless you go to Miami or something. I'm just kidding. No, not that we're going to discuss. But for real estate activities, no. Now, if you get a license, but then you're convicted of a crime, found guilty, check this out. You must self-report yourself, self-report to the commission within, yes, exactly. That's the first sentence, lines 32 and 33. Any questions about that? Okay. And our last subject of this unit, yes, our last subject, and then we'll be done, is the real estate recovery what? Fund. If I can simplify this for you, I want you to think of it as essentially a giant piggy bank filled with money from all of us. Now, what money am I referring to? Everybody that applies for a real estate license pays an application fee. Everybody that renews their license pays a renewal fee. They take a piece out of these fees and they place it into this giant piggy bank. But what was it set up for? This is what you're going to be tested on. It was set up for reimbursement of consumers who are financially injured by a licensee in our business. So it's actually a good thing. It's a safety net for consumers who lost money because of a real estate licensee's negligence, misconduct. But you have to go through steps in order to seek reimbursement from the Real Estate Recovery Fund. They're not just going to hand out money willy-nilly. If you go to the next page, page 145. First of all, the licensee who you're making a claim against to be reimbursed because of whatever circumstance, they have to meet some requirements. When they committed the act, they have to have had a current, valid, and active real estate license. That's number one. Number two, the person who you're making a claim against cannot be the buyer, seller, landlord, or tenant within the transaction. And that means they acted in the sole capacity of a real estate licensee in that transaction. They didn't wear any other hat. They didn't take on any other role. So that's the licensee's requirement. Now, the person making the claim against the licensee, they call him a claimant, has to meet these requirements. I can simplify it for you. It says you have to file a civil suit and you have to try to collect the money through the court system. If you get a judgment against them, that means you won. That means they're required to pay you something, but you have to go through the court system to try to get that money. If the licensee doesn't have the money because they spent it all, went on a shopping spree or whatever the case may be. Imagine they stole your deposit. I'll give you an example. They defraud, you gave them $10,000 as a deposit for a property, and they say, oh, make the check payable to me. Okay, instead of the broker. I'll take care of it. Or maybe it was the broker who stole the money. You have to go through this process. So you have to take them to court first. You have to get a judgment against them. That means you won in that lawsuit. And you have to try to collect the money through that lawsuit. The court system is very broken. So if the licensee doesn't have the money, refuses to pay, or files for what? Bankruptcy, then you can go to the real estate recovery fund for reimbursement. After all else fails. If they file bankruptcy, you can go straight to the recovery fund. And spouses cannot make a claim against one another. Obviously, there's something suspicious going on there. Can't game the system. What's the time period to make a claim against a licensee to be reimbursed? 2 years of the alleged violation. What's the maximum payout per claim? Yes. How much? $50,000. What if they scammed multiple people out of their deposit? I'm just giving you an example. What's the maximum total from multiple claims? $150. So it can be 10 people at $15,000 each. It could be 3 people at $50,000 each, but 50 is a maximum per claim. What if you were defrauded, you were scammed out of a $10,000 deposit, that example we talked about earlier, due to a licensee? What's the most that you can claim from the real estate recovery fund? It stopped exactly. It stops at 10,000. It's not a lottery ticket. It's not like, okay, they scam me out of 10,000. I'm going to go for the maximum 50. You can't do that. It stops at the amount you lost due to the licensee, and the maximum is 50,000. So if they scammed you out of $60,000 in the real estate transaction, it stops at 50. If you go to the next page, this is going to confirm what we mentioned. I alluded to this. What's the most that you can be reimbursed from the real estate? What type of damages can you claim? Only what? Compensatory damages. So that's the exact money you lost due to that licensee, their actions within the real estate transaction. If it's $10,000 deposit, that's it. It stops right there. Which means you cannot, look, the fund will not reimburse, line 9, not reimburse attorneys' fees, court costs, legal fees, punitive damages. Do you know what punitive damages are? You familiar with this? The example I like to give is that woman that went to McDonald's, ordered their coffee, and what happened? She spilled the scalding hot coffee on her lap, and she did suffer a degree burns, and there's medical stuff, but it's America. People always sue. But what you don't know about that famous case is she was like the 102nd person to file a lawsuit against McDonald's for the same thing, scalding hot coffee. But they wanted to make an example out of this particular case and go after McDonald's for punitive damages. They awarded her like $1 million to $2 million in punitive damages because they wanted to slap McDonald's on the wrist and say, we're gonna keep on, going after you for more and more. You got to regulate this, otherwise, this is the type of penalty that will result. But you can't claim that from the recovery fund. It's not pain and suffering. It's just the money you lost in the transaction. And what's going to happen to their license until they reimburse, pay back the real estate recovery fund plus interest, mandatory suspension. Plus interest, guys. Mandatory suspension. It's kind of like a catch-22 because imagine you were using your real estate license to provide a living for yourself. You had this claim against you. They won. You have to pay back the real estate recovery fund plus interest, but you needed your real estate license to make the money to pay that back, So it's like, okay, what do I do, Anyhow. Last thing for this unit. Do you remember what an EDO is? What EDO is? It's actually right here again. It's on lines 19 and 20. Escrow disbursement order. Do you remember what this was all about from our previous unit? Okay, let me review with you guys. Transaction fails. Buyer and seller are fighting over the deposit. We call this conflicting demands. Do you remember conflicting demands? Within the first 15 days, you must notify who? Correct. And within 30 days, start the escape procedures. Do you remember that? Okay. What are the escape procedures? Forms the acronym what? MAIL. Mediation, arbitration, litigation, and escrow disbursement order. We call it EDO. What is EDO? Asking for whose advice? Freck. You say, hey, Freck, who do you think should get the deposit? This is what's going on. They're fighting over it. If you ask Freck for their advice, do they have to give you advice? No. If they give you advice, must you take it? No. If they give advice and you take it, is Freck responsible? So what happens if you're sued because Freck gave you bad advice? Does Freck reimburse you? Yes. Through the real estate recovery what? Not their money, our money, because of their mistake. Application fees, renewal fees, yeah. So that's what we have here. And what's the maximum they reimburse the broker that they gave bad advice to? Yeah. You'll see that here. It's actually right here. Lines 22 through 25. Yep. Any questions?
Yes. Two. Does the brokerage firm get sued as well, or is just that one?
That's a good question. That's a great question. And just to piggyback off of what we described to you, when you make a complaint to be reimbursed from the Real Estate Recovery Fund against the licensee, it can only be against an individual licensee. It cannot be against a brokerage firm. So you have to hold a person accountable, not an entity, not a brokerage. None of that has to be. If you think the broker is responsible, you go after the broker. If you think the associate's responsible, you go after the associate. They'll get down to the bottom of it and figure out who's responsible for what. But that's to answer your question. Any other questions based on this? No? We're done with this unit. So what are we doing tonight? Homework, yes. You can't skip these every single night. I know I'm taking over for reading out the questions and sharing with you the answers, but I need you to challenge yourself. My goal is to see you pass on your first attempt. And if you have asked any of our previous students who have passed on the first attempt, they know how important these questions are. These are state exam type questions you're doing every single night. I can't stress the importance enough. So be prepared for tomorrow. We'll go through those questions every single day. And what's today? Wednesday? Oh my gosh. Exactly. I mean, tomorrow's Thursday. This is hump day, right? I never liked that. Hump day. Sounds so vulgar. But anyhow, getting over the hump, I guess. All right, we're done with our session for tonight. You guys are dismissed, and I will see you tomorrow. Who's actually submitted their paid for their fingerprints?
Oh, I did, and it's still not working.
It's not work. We're gonna get down to the bottom of it. Okay. I'm gonna call the individual that we had this. That's odd. What is the website saying?
I've tried it multiple times.
Yeah, I'm gonna get down to the bottom of this. One of our staff members is on right now, and we're gonna make sure one of our moderators is on, and he'll make sure that he follows up with this. So I'll get an answer for you by tomorrow. Okay. Yeah, but go ahead and do that, and then also the application would be wait at least a day and then do the application. And also the chat, yes. So those of you who want to be a part of the study group, that should be all of you. Put your name and number, full name and number in the chat, and then Nisha, she'll go ahead and take a screenshot of it. Awesome. Thank you. Raphael, yes. Awesome. Great. Thank you, Lucas. Thank you, Ariana. All right. Yeah, she'll take a screenshot of that. And the exam prep, make sure, take advantage of the exam prep, get some additional study time in. It's going to simplify a lot for you. You were unable to find the exam test. It's called exam prep. Yeah, Florida Real Estate Exam Prep.
And it's the.
Yes, exactly. Those of you taking class in person, you have the QR code. It's on your textbook, it's on your notebook. But for those of you online, just go to our website and go to the search tool and type in Florida Real Estate Exam Prep. Just search that and you'll find it. All right. Have a great night. Enjoy yourself. Push in your chairs, clean up your mess, drive safe. God bless. I'll see you mañana.